Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Lightning Deku Had Gaming Cafe. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya sat in his room feeling somber as he browsed the hero forums, scouring for any rumors or information to add to his ever-growing list of hero notes. Though his pen, which once felt lighter than a feather, had begun to feel like lead ever since that day. It was a day like any other, from the jeers of classmates to Bakugo beating him up. Yet that day took its first step towards a long downward spiral when his teacher declared his intention of applying to UA, the #1 school in the country. From its engineering revolutionaries to some of the world's leading entrepreneurs, and most prominent of all was its hero course. Entering UA only happens twice for most people, once in high school and a second for university, if they can even manage to snag an application to the university courses run by the institution. His prized notebook he had been working on was scorched and thrown out a window as Bakugo uttered those idiotic words. "Maybe you should take a swan dive and pray for a quirk in your next life, Deku," was what he had shouted at him in the classroom. The teacher had only bothered to glance up before dismissing it once he realized it was Izuku being targeted. It lit a fire of spite in his heart. He would prove to him that he was going to be a hero no matter what. Until he walked under that overpass, mumbling his hopes for the future, he was caught off guard by a large mound of sentient sludge that tackled him and begun trying to breach any orifice on Izuku while telling him how he would a nice akin suit. Only for him to be narrowly saved by All Might. All Might had been the top hero for practically decades at this point. Everyone looked up to him and knew his iconic catchphrase, "I am here," who preached in every interview that what mattered most to becoming a hero was not a quirk but the determination and effort to become a hero. Yet as he grabbed onto the leg of his hero and faced him with his question on that rooftop, all he was left with was broken dreams. Realistic, Izuku knew what he meant, but it was unfair. There were heroes like Snipe, Lady Nagant, Eraserhead, and hell, even Night Eye when it came to his active duty work essentially could all be replicated using weapons or simply fought quirkless. Lady Nagant had a rifle for an arm and that was it. It was all up to her skill whether she landed her shots or not. Though he knew he was not hero material. His body held little muscle he built from his meager attempts at training, but any definition to his body would leave him beaten by Bakugo, ruining his hard work as he spent time recovering. So he instead focused on his wits so he could use his plan to get in through the sports festival as his attempt. But he just did not feel motivated anymore to become a hero. Even when his body moved on its own to save Bakugo from that sludge monster he let fall out of All Might's pocket. In the end the heroes berated him and it finally ripped out anything it had left, so he ran home not wanting to be reminded of his failures anymore. It had been 3 weeks since he had withdrawn his application from UA, which thankfully meant Bakugo left him alone so he could focus on his own training to be a hero. Spent more time cooped up in his room than chasing heroes, and found he had a knack for something he never tried before: video games. Being the protagonist in his own story, relying on his choices and skills to become the best in RPGs, and working with others in FPS games felt just as fun. No one would curse him for being quirkless. They would yell slurs, but it seemed they yelled those indiscriminately. So he indulged himself in all sorts of video games, finding he had a couple favorites at the moment. Resident Villain and Hero Strike, each having their own charm as games, and he loved watching gameplay to analyze himself. Inko was not too happy her son had been spending more time in his room, but he did leave plenty of time where they would watch films together and the sort. Frankly, she was glad he moved on from heroes and chasing villain fights. They would make her so worried as she waited at home, fearing he may have become collateral in some brutal fight he chased after. It did pain her to watch him sell so much of his merchandise, thinning out his collection. Izuku was planning on getting her something, but she insisted he kept it for himself. Her son had made a large amount from the fact they were all mint condition, and some of them rose exponentially since he was gifted them. Yet despite this she did wonder why he stopped talking about heroes and little Katsuki. But that was a mystery for a different day. Quickly the 8 months went past and Izuku grimaced looking at his letters he had already received from the schools across Mustafu so far. That med school Aldra littered his report with slander and so many black marks he only remembered a big reason why UA was his top choice. The entrance exam and personality interview allowed students who may be subjected to discrimination a chance to enter the school. Yet he threw that away with his dreams. Exhaling, he walked up to his mother and just quietly cried into her shoulder as she ruffled his hair. His dad talked to him on the phone and had suggested some ideas for what to do after school ends. A big idea his dad was pushing for was to have Izuku try running a business, something small like a startup. Izuku's dad Hisashi was a good man, a little distant, only ever talking on phone calls, but he supported his family well. Having offered Izuku a decent sum of money, he left it open for suggestion of usage whenever he wanted. With that, their late-night phone call ended and Izuku fell asleep. Beep. Izuku could not tell whether that was his alarm or not. Welcome user Midoriya Izuku, I am the Hypertech Internet Cafe system. You have one mission pending. Then came a voice startling Izuku up. The voice was somewhat monotone and leaning towards a more feminine sound, though it could also very well just be androgynous. Looking around, he saw no one and, feeling confused, rubbed his eyes, thinking this may still be a dream, till he was greeted by a screen in front of him. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. I am the Hypertech Internet Cafe system. Congratulations on your selection to be the current host of this system. You have one mission pending. Do you open the mission file? Yes, no. Izuku just sat there stunned and clicked onto the yes button. Then came a new screen with more information. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, beginning anew. Time remaining for completion, 6 days 23 hours. Description, you are the new host of this system. With that comes the need for a few required facilities to ensure that the system can be utilized properly. Criteria, obtain a building with functioning electricity and water. To convert into a cafe. Rewards, 3x Hypertech certified immersion rigs. Access to Resident Evil 1, Hypertech Edition. Access to user functionality privileges, Tier 1. Renovation of facility within Tier 1 options. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission, removal of memory of system. Accept or deny. Izuku looked at it and read the penalty. If this was a dream or not, it seemed he really had nothing to lose, so he clicked accept. Izuku looked at the timer and then realized this was real. But then what was Hypertech and Resident Evil? The latter sounded a lot like the game Resident Villain, but was it some kind of upgrade to it? The head was flooded by more questions like, was this his quirk? And more. Yet it now seemed he had a goal to set up a gaming cafe, judging by the fact it offered a game with the cafe. His dad did suggest it as an idea, and to be honest, running a cafe where he can play games with others seemed nice. So he got out of bed and cleaned himself up and checked his phone. Selling his merch had given him quite the ample fund, excluding what his dad also offered. As he sat eating cereal that morning, his mum walked in yawning. Morning, Izuku. How did you sleep, sweetie? She asked, half asleep. I slept all right, but I had an idea for what I want to do as a business. He replied by taking the kettle from his mum to fill at the tap. Is that so? What do you plan? She asked curiously. Taking a deep breath, he spoke. I want to open an internet cafe. He looked back into his mother's emerald eyes and watched the gears in her mind spin, trying to find a response. Are you sure? Was what she came up with. Of course, they are generally self-sufficient besides managing something. We don't really have something like that in Mustafu, and besides, this is the city of UA, there will definitely be plenty of high schoolers and the like as customers. Izuku, that's wonderful. But we need to plan this first, and definitely talk to your father first. After all, we need to make sure you have all the needed credentials and registrations. She said resolutely. Looking him in the eye, she saw the determination in that focus. Izuku smiled and nodded. Thankfully, it was a weekend, which meant he could spend some time looking at buildings and planning. Although he would need to find an excuse for where his computers are coming from. At that moment, he heard a familiar beep as a voice spoke in his head. You didn't think this glorious system had not prepared an alibi? Came a haughty female voice. For your cafe, you can explain it as a franchise sponsored by the system. Since we do have an official website you can use to cover your tracks for this, just search it up. The website is... Izuku hastily picked up his phone. hypertechcafe.co.jp. Once he hit enter, he was presented with a very well-formatted website with bold lettering of Hypertech in the center. Quickly browsing the website, it looked like it was legitimate. Of course it's legitimate. There is nothing but the best which is produced by the system after all. Came the voice, reading his thoughts once again. It really sounded like a feminine bakugo. Especially with its ego. Don't worry, we sent an email to your account to state you have been accepted as a franchisee once you obtain a location. Izuku decided to show this to his mum so he could possibly speed up the establishment of the store. I do have the site of the company that runs the franchise on hand. Also, I do have the email. I was thinking of this a little while back, so I tested my luck with an application for franchise ownership. He told her the email and then the website. He had lied a little, but nothing that would be harmful. Inko was stunned looking at her son having already been so thoroughly prepared despite him seeming to have just decided the idea first thing this morning. Okay, Izuku, if you are serious and already have this confirmation, we can start looking at properties since it's my day off. But even though you are already considered an adult, next time tell me when you sign a contract. She scolded lightly. Got it? He responded meekly. Then they called up Hisashi, who seemed ecstatic at the idea of Izuku attempting to break into a niche business for a startup. Hisashi was the kind of person that loved taking long shots, and for him that always seemed to work. Even though it did end up with him having to run his business in person in America. It did not help that he was in the hospital a few years ago from an accident when a villain attacked the company while he was talking to them. When Izuku brought up how the franchise had Resident Evil, he seemed ecstatic talking about how his little brother had loved that game and it was technically considered retro to most. After that talk, his dad sent a little more than what he promised to give Izuku, saying he would love to visit when he can. Soon he and his mother were spending time at the table looking at spots they thought would be best for the cafe. Eventually they found a location for sale quite close to UA with an apartment on the top. So they decided to contact the seller to check it out. Getting to the cafe was a relatively quick train ride around 30 minutes away. They were soon greeted by the two-story building which peering in was hollowed out for the most part. The contract was discussed and they were happy to allow Izuku to have the store registered with documents by Monday. Yet once Izuku signed the contract handing ownership on that table, he heard a ding. Once he had gotten home, he had called up the screen to see it had some updated information. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, beginning anew. Time remaining for completion, 5 days 10 hours. Description, you are the new host of this system. With that comes the need for a few required facilities to ensure that the system can be utilized properly. Criteria, done, obtain a building with functioning electricity and water to convert into a cafe. Rewards, 3x Hypertech certified immersion rigs. Access to Resident Evil 1, Hypertech Edition. Access to user functionality privileges, Tier 1. Renovation of facility within Tier 1 options. Note, with users' highly efficient speed at obtaining the cafe, they are given 3 stat points. Izuku looked at the stat point note and then clicked the menu tab in the corner and saw he had a few options and moved over to the Stats tab. Name, Midoriya Izuku, user 0002. Current privilege rank, Tier 1. Privileges noted. Can view stat page. Renovation access, T1. Access to Resident Evil. Can add stat points to stat sheet. Current accessible game library. Resident Evil 1. Stats, 3 points to add. Plus strength, 6, barely able to do a push-up. Plus dexterity, 14, can thread a needle most of the time. Plus intelligence, 18, smarter than most without intelligence quirks. Plus constitution, 7, standing in the rain will make you ill. Skills, high-speed speech, rapid analysis, low-tier parallel processing. Inventory items. Looking over his stats, he was surprised by them, though he did look sadly at how low his constitution and strength was. He remembered how each stat in most games were important and he decided that he would like to be a little stronger and less frail, so he put 2 points into strength and 1 in constitution. Then looked over his stats again. Name, Midoriya Izuku, user 0002. Current privilege rank, Tier 1. Privileges noted. Can view stat page. Renovation access, T1. Access to Resident Evil. Can add stat points to stat sheet. Current accessible game library. Resident Evil 1. Sits, 0 points to add. Strength, can do a few push-ups, probably. Dexterity, 14, can still only thread a needle most of the time. Intelligence, 18, smarter than most without intelligence quirks. Constitution, 8, can run a third of a mile, hopefully. Skills, high-speed speech, rapid analysis, low-tier parallel processing. Inventory items. Izuku felt his breathing easier a bit more than it normally did. Nothing major, but it was a lot more comfortable after all. Bakugo left his lungs ridden with smoke inhalation from burning most of his things every day. While he poked his arm and felt how they were firmer than before, and when he flexed his arm he could actually see the bicep raise a little. His eyes lit up at the potential of this, his quirk. This system could make him stronger. User, can you please check the new mission logs? The system asked. Okay, also system? Yes. Are you a girl? It paused for a while. I think so. I never really thought about it. But yes, this glorious system will declare themselves as a woman. Yep, definitely a girl. Bakugo. Izuku thought. Noted. Then Izuku went to open the mission interface. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, opening week. Time remaining for completion, 7 days 5 hours. Description, you now have a store which the system will be renovating tonight. Open the store within a week and ready for business. Criteria, 0 to 1 obtain 1 paying customer. 00000/60,000 earn 60,000 yen. Rewards, 2 stat point. Drink unlocked, Coca-Cola price, 400 yen per bottle. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission. User will lose allocated stat points. Accept or deny. Izuku gulped, looking at the risk of losing his stat points, and groaned at how he realized he had no other choice and clicked on accept. Izuku was home later that night as the system told him it was currently renovating the cafe for operations. So he did what he had been doing for the past 6 months and sat at his computer and booted up Counter Heroes. He was happy to see his 4 friends all online. Shox 420, Dusty Boy, Scaleson Blades and Splitter. Sending a message, he waited in voice chat for them to join and was greeted by the first ping. Hey, Green, how come you're on? You basically never play on a Sunday. Shox asked, happy his friend was on. I needed to unwind, after all I'm going to be a lot busier and might not be able to. As Izuku was about to finish, another 2 joined. Sup/hey y'all, the 2 said in unison. Dusty and Scales join at the same time. We're doing good, just Green was about to say something. Shox responded. Yeah, I may not be able to play as much starting from tomorrow. Going to be busy. Then the final ping of the group joined, being Splitter. Guys, sorry I was late, just finished training. What did I miss? Green apparently has more important things than us. Dusty remarked. The betrayal of Green. She gasped. Izuku sighed at Dusty's antics. No, it's just I'm going to be opening a cafe soon, as in a gaming cafe. So it'll take a lot of time managing it. How the hell do you have a cafe? You're like 14. Scales shouted into his mic. Yeah, I know, surprise. Got accepted into running a franchise's cafe where I live since I'm not going to high school after all. Hold up, why are you dropping out of school? Shox asked. I'm bad at school, but even I'm going. Most schools won't accept me because Aldra basically put every black mark and disciplinary action they could on it. Also, I'm quirkless. Izuku froze at the realization he just revealed he had no quirk. His heart thumped in anticipation, only to be greeted by the same statement by all of them. Why does being quirkless matter? They replied in unison. He began to laugh as tears came up to his eyes in joy. Green, you okay? Splitter asked. Yeah, I'm just happy. Everyone in my school Essex, they all hate me because I'm quirkless. That's stupid. But I can relate. I have a complex mutation and that made getting jobs nearly impossible. Scales replied. I get bullied when practicing my quirk since if I overload it, I basically go blank and just have to stand there as people laugh at me. Shocks responded in solidarity. Hell, my quirk is the worst. I have to wear gloves or everything around me breaks. I basically can never go out since my dad doesn't want me to get in trouble. Dusty said. Dusty's dad might be super controlling or strict. Izuku thought. Yeah, if it wasn't for the fact my parents are well off, I would have gotten bullied a lot more than I already did for my quirk. So many people make creepy comments or just say it's not a strong quirk. Splitter grumbled. We feel ya. Dusty replied. Anyways, how about we play some matches and try to rank out of silver? God, I hate the ranking system, it's such a DMN screw-up. Scales said. A few hours had gone by into the night till it was around 3 in the morning when they came off. Thank God we finally ranked up. That was painful. Dusty groaned. At least we are in gold. Shocks said optimistically. That's fair. Scales replied. Oh yeah, Green, before we log off, mind telling us where that cafe you plan to run is? Splitter asked to bring the attention onto Izuku. Might as well tell you since it's a cafe. It's in Mustafu on Hero Street. When it's open you should see it easily. Izuku responded. Wait, you live in Mustafu? Splitter asked. Yes, I do. Izuku asked why she needed the confirmation. Dude, I'm applying to UA. I've got my recommendation exam soon. Splitter shouted back eagerly. Izuku winced at the words. If you get in, does that mean you'll be able to visit? Of course. Splitter replied. Wait, you two are also heading into Mustafu? I'm planning on taking the normal entrance exams for UA. Shocks joined in. Does that mean we can all hang out after classes at Green's Cafe? Splitter asked. I guess so. Izuku replied. Then, you two are off to be heroes. Make sure you save people like us, unlike all those other fakes. Scales said. You got it, boss. The two aspiring students replied. I ain't happy you guys are aiming to become heroes, but I won't stop you. Dusty said. Make sure you guys can fight villains and not just run from them. But if that's it, I'm going to head to bed. With that, everyone logged off and Izuku fell asleep wondering why Scales and Dusty seemed to not really like heroes. A beeping noise rang and he groggily turned to see a blue screen shaped like an alarm clock blaring 6 o'clock. He got up and looked straight and was greeted by a new screen accompanied by the system. Hello, Izuku Midoriya. User 0002. The renovations are completed by this generous system. Everything has been set up, so please make your way to the cafe to see if it's to your liking. He groaned and began to prepare himself. Seeing his mum also awake, he smiled. Morning, Mum, he said, yawning a little. Izuku, I need to mention this, but you don't have school this week. Something to do with a villain attack on the school. Inko replied. Okay, I was going to check out the cafe today, so I might do that after breakfast. So eager to start a business. If you want, we can probably get you tested out of middle school early. That could work. How long would it need to take to be booked? A couple days. We can get you to do the test by Thursday. That would work great. Izuku responded eagerly, happy to avoid ever going back to Aldra. He knew the material already after all the teachers were too busy sending him to detention for him to learn anything in most classes. With a quick breakfast, he left the house around 7 and was heading to the cafe. He started a conversation with the system. So, system, what are you? Izuku asked in his head to the system. I am the best system, of course. She announced proudly. No, not like are you any good. I mean you are my quirk, right? I'm not your quirk. She responded flatly. Izuku stopped walking midway. What? I'm not a quirk as you put it. A genetic mutation in which expresses itself in a large variety of traits generally confirmed by an emission of quirk factor radiation. I am the system, a general help tool created by its parent branch, the Black Tech Internet Cafe system. Wait, what is quirk factor radiation and the Black Tech system? Izuku asked, even more confused. Quirk factor radiation, or QFR, is a passive energy emitted from people with quirks. It meshes with the environment and is what allows you to use quirks without them hindering your biology. While Black Tech System is what created me after testing and seeing success in its user's world. Rather than processing crystals, I simply process passive radiation in small doses to refine into energy. So, I have no QFR and you are actually a system in a system. Izuku summarized. Pretty much. She responded apathetically. Izuku continued his walk to the cafe, a little dazed at the information he heard. There is more than one world. Quirks work through radiation they emit, and his system was a second generation of a previous one. He decided to shelf that to the side of his mind for later. As he finally approached his cafe, greeted by sleek glass doors and a large sign that said Origin Gaming Cafe on the front. Walking in, he felt the blast of warm air from the air conditioning, a welcomed feel from the cold December air. Greeting him was a reception area with a screen behind it and computer up front. While he peered in, the back wall was lined by 3 identical setups, each with a desk, computer, peripherals, and what looked to be a VR headset at one side. Inspecting the reception area, he saw a board listed with a set of rules on the front of it reading. Opening times. Mon. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Tuesday. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Wed. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Thursday. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Friday. 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Sat. 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Sun. 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Rules of Origin Internet Cafe. If you want to play, then play. Troublemakers will be dealt with accordingly. Pay up front, and if you cannot pay, then leave. Prices listed are non-negotiable. Signing up for a card allows you to keep track of unused time, and replacements will cost you. Maximum of 6 hours of game time a day. Prices of Origin Internet Cafe. Membership cards, hour allowance per month included. Iron, 0 hours. Free for signing up, 750 yen to replace. Bronze, 10 hours, 7,250 yen per month, 1,000 yen to replace. Silver, 25 hours, 17,500 yen per month, 1,500 yen to replace. Gold, 40 hours, 27,500 yen per month, 3,000 yen to replace. First hour activation, 500 yen for non-members and 250 yen for members. Hourly rate for usage, outside of member allowance, 750 yen. Game activation costs. Resident Evil 1, 1250 yen. Food and beverages. Those opening times will be the end of him. But the system seemed to have thought of everything but snacks. You will unlock snacks later, just make sure you actually are earning money first. The system remarked at his thoughts. Guess I better set myself up for opening today. He said to no one but himself. Hopefully he got some customers. Izuku sat at the reception desk as the clock ticked past 10 in the morning. Realistically, he should have expected most people would not be playing till after 3 or 4 when school ended. Yet the system insisted 8 in the morning was the optimal start time. Deciding to alleviate some of his own boredom, he sat at one of the rings. System, do I have to pay to use the system? Izuku asked. Do you want to? It bit back a little snarky. I'm taking that as free. Izuku huffed. With that, he sat in the comfortable chair, reclining it a little and sitting in. Then he went to the headset at the side of the desk and put it on. His body relaxed in the chair and he was suddenly immersed into the system. Looking in front, he saw the screen displaying games, with Resident Evil being the only option, and selected it. Soon he was brought into the game and was faced with 2 options. Select your character. Special Operations Agent. Note, stats will be adjusted accordingly. Looking at the discernible face of Chris at the side of his choice, Izuku assumed it must be the main character of the story and selected it. Soon he was greeted by Raccoon City. Time ticked by as he got used to the immersion. He was moving according to his body, and it seemed and felt like he was there. He could hear subtle sounds, and the stench of the mansion he was faced with was pungent. Seeing what he thought was a person, he began approaching them. Is this the tutorial? He asked towards the figure. only for it to turn to him and reveal a grotesque and gnarled look. It growled and started to lunge at him. Izuku managed to barely avoid its wildly swinging attacks and managed to grab his knife from his side and stab it. The motion was fluid and Izuku felt as if a hand was guiding him till he saw a small prompt below in his field of view. Note: playing as Chris at early levels, you will be guided by the system till you are capable of his techniques. Happy fighting! Zombies, why would it be anything else but zombies? He muttered. Then Izuku began to focus on the fact the game was letting him learn the character skills. He wondered if these techniques would translate later on to himself. With it he began playing again till his first death at a dog that went and ripped at him. Ah! He yelped, taking the headset off with a hand to his throat. The pain was so surreal and he was feeling as if his heart was beating at full. System, what was that? The death replication system is working well. The game is ensured to be as realistic as possible to ensure maximum learning potential. It is possible to lower the pain sensitivity, but it's ill-advised for the user if they intend to learn rapidly. She chimed. Izuku thought about it. The pain of dying was definitely a shock, but he had nearly died before and spent a decade being beaten. He wanted to be stronger as fast as he could. Got it? Izuku responded by slipping the headset back on. By the time Izuku was done, it was already around 6 in the afternoon without a customer on his first day. Getting up, he was proud of his progress and how his muscles twitched in memory of each technique he took to heart. But then he began to flex his muscles and felt them bulge a lot more than they should. Quickly he navigated to his status window and looked. Name: Midoriya Izuku, user 0002. Current privilege rank, Tier 1. Privileges noted. Can view stat page. Renovation access, T1. Access to Resident Evil. Can add stat points to stat sheet. Current accessible game library. Resident Evil 1. Sits, 0 points to add. Strength, 12, can do push-ups easily. Dexterity, 16, can thread a needle all of the time. Intelligence, 18, smarter than most without intelligence quirks. Constitution, 12, can run a full of a mile with ease. Realm, early body forging, beginning of this sprout. Realm progression, 13.3, just starting out. Skills, high-speed speech, rapid analysis, low-tier parallel processing, mid-level CQC, mid-level knife combat, low-level firearm usage. Inventory items. He saw the new status information about skills and he was confused. His new skills made sense as he played the game, but he had no clue what realm could possibly mean. System, what is this realm on my status tab? Izuku asked. It is a method of training to gain strength and abilities. You are currently in the early body forging realm of warrior cultivation. Now even a string bean like you can put up a fight, probably. How do I improve then? Izuku was curious about it. Simply training in these games allows you to cultivate energy to refine your body whilst learning techniques can help with intelligence and dexterity that require practice. This system feels bad, so here's some advice. To reach peak of body forging you will need around 40 in strength, constitution, and dexterity. After all, you have just about reached the basics of normal people. The realm points is essentially the average score of these values, and that's technically what needs to reach 40 itself. Though I recommend having a balance of stats before you specialize, or you may bottleneck later on. So keep grinding. My life has become a glorified RPG. Izuku groaned as he heard the door open. Turning, he greeted the person. Welcome to Origin Gaming Cafe. Then he took in the look of the person. She was a little taller than him with blonde hair and glasses. Hi, I was just looking around. What kind of games do you have here? She asked. Well, currently we have one game in the library due to more being in development for the systems we run. That caught her curiosity as she tilted her head a little. Why is that? Due to the realism factor of these systems, making games with full range of freedom and making them realistic can be difficult. If you like, you can try. He suggested, hoping to make his first sale today. How much is it to try? She said, her eyes were lighting up eagerly. It depends on whether you want to sign up as a member or not. Members get things a little cheaper and get to keep track of time they pay for on their card if they end a session earlier than paid for. Got it, that makes sense. She then turned to the board he pointed at with the prices. I'll try just an hour today so I can get an iron card. Izuku nodded, making his way to the computer at the reception and opened up to be greeted by the membership creation page. I'm going to need a name and any ID if you can. This is just so you can make a new one in case you lose your old one. Also an email and phone number. My name is Melissa Shield. She said she followed up with her information and an ID she had. Izuku's face remained stoic as his brain began to go blank for the sheer shock. Shield, like David Shield, the creator of All Might's costumes? No, that can't be, it has to be a coincidence. You aren't related to David Shield, are you? He joked, handing her the membership card. The card was a sleek black with a gray triangle in one corner. The system told him to just input the card in the device besides the computer to upgrade or downgrade the cards whenever. She looked a little surprised. How did you know? You do have the same last name after all. He responded. This caught her a little off guard. That didn't make sense. Also, how much for an hour of Resident Evil then? For the first hour, 2,250 yen. You can continue to pay more hours by coming up to the reception and asking me to add them on. Though if you do plan on playing a lot, an upgraded membership gets you a set amount of hours at a discounted price. He said, handing her the card device. If I like it, I'll definitely take a look. She said, smiling as she paid her first hour and headed to a seat. Melissa reclined into the seat and felt as if she was on a cloud with how comfortable it was. Then at the side was a small slot with an indicator for the card, and she put it in. On the screen was a prompt, for full immersion please relax into your seat and place the headset on. So she did just that and immediately was greeted by an array of colors and then a start screen for Resident Evil. Clicking start, she faced two options. Select your character. Special Operations Agent. Note, stats will be adjusted accordingly. Clicking on Jill, she began her game. Izuku watched as she played, thinking it may be in bad taste to play games while he had customers, so he decided to ask the system a few more questions once her headset was on. System, what is the point of stat points as a reward when I gain more from gaining? Izuku asked. Well, you are only gaining a rapid amount since you are building your earliest foundations. Think of it like newbie gains in the gym where you gain the most early on. When you are lacking in overall points of development in some aspects, those points can help cover your weakness. Also, I shouldn't mention this, but loose stat points can be turned into currency for you to spend. It's why I'll offer a few every now and then. That makes sense, thanks for answering the questions. Anytime, I's a user. She quickly corrected herself. Thankfully Izuku did not hear that slip up, already mumbling. Izuku was thinking about whether he would want to develop faster or save them for later. But he should worry about that later, so he had opened up his mission tab to check his current one. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, opening week. Time remaining for completion, 6 days 6 hours. Description, you now have a store which the system will be renovating tonight. Open the store within a week and ready for business. Criteria, 1/1 obtain 1 paying customer. 2250/60,000 earn 60,000 yen. Rewards, 2 stat point. Drink unlocked, Coca-Cola price, 400 yen per bottle. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission, user will lose allocated stat points. Active. He smiled, having taken his first steps into his business. Though he had been worried the Coke price may end up a little high. Then he heard a yelp and turned to see Melissa take her headset off, a little pale. What was that? She questioned, turning to him. Oh, did you die? The game is a little too realistic for most at times. Gave me a good scare too. Izuku chuckled at his own death. That was horrifying. How is this so realistic? Not sure, my sponsor made the technology. They wanted me to set this place up. Is it always that painful? Not every time. But if you would like, you can reduce the sense of immersion, but it does kind of dampen the overall experience. Melissa debated it in her head whether she wanted that or not. No, it's fine, I'll bear it. Then happy gaming, But be aware you do have about 20 minutes left since you spent 40 in there already. He heard her click her tongue. Can I get a silver membership? Melissa knew she was gonna play a lot more of this. The story was so enticing and its gripping immersion made it feel like its own world. But it helped she felt like she was the protagonist of the story with Jill also being quirkless. Alright, that'll be 17,500 yen and is paid each month for 25 hours. Okay, she replied, swiping her card to pay for the new one. Izuku took her card and placed it in a small scanner-like device and it returned with a silver card with white lines in the design and her name in the bottom. Smiling, she took her new card. Thanks. Just remember we have about 4 hours left till closing. Okay. She made her way back to the setup. Izuku was happy he made around 20,000 yen for the day already. Deciding to kill time, he went on his phone and opened up his messenger and started talking to everyone in the group chat. Greenmite, sup guys? Splitter, Green, you're alive. Are you up for some games? Greenmite, sorry, currently working right now. Got a customer on day one. Dusty boy, nice. Anyways Green, what games do you have in the cafe? Greenmite, I've only got like one game. It's Resident Evil. Scales and Blades, only one game? Greenmite, yep, it's because they need to be made compatible with the current systems I use and also licensing stuff. Scales and Blades, so it's just a trial for the opening? Greenmite, pretty much. Dusty boy, Green, what is Resident Evil? Greenmite, it's basically a zombie horror game. Gotta make your way through the missions and story. It's pretty good though, dying hurts like hell. Shocks 420, you died? WTF. What did I miss? Dusty boy, Green, talking about the game in his cafe. What did you mean hurts? Greenmite, well the game is super immersive and that means all senses. Unfortunately that also means pain gets transferred over too. Dusty boy, Angel, that sounds badass and terrifying. Send me your address. I need to see this. Scales and Blades, same here. Shocks 420. I'd make it but I live too far for a day trip, especially with training for the exam. Splitter, I can make it. I live like an hour by train from Mustafu. Greenmite, alright, the address is 27 Hikoto Street, Mustafu West District. Dusty boy, that's actually pretty close since I live in Kamino, so wanna meet in 2 days or something. Greenmite, yeah that's cool. At Scales and Blades and at Splitter, what about you guys? Splitter, I can make it. I'll just ask my tutors if I can have the day off since I'm already ahead in my classes. Scales and Blades, tutors? Diamen, that's rich people stuff. Anyways, I can make the Wednesday. Greenmite, nice, see you guys then. With that he decided to hop on his computer at the reception, which unfortunately did not have a headset, and started working on his latest hero analysis. He started getting back into them since he actually loved doing them. It was just a painful reminder of that day. Browsing hero forums and the sort, he saw a video of Eraserhead and began diving into it. But as he worked he slowly realized he was seeing every subtle movement and detail, recognizing them as the same fighting style as Chris when he got in close while at range using his scarf. Though Izuku began picking up his hair, it was acting as a tell for his quirk, and it started to irritate him that the man had not decided to tie it. As he sunk into his work and notes, he realized it was already 10 and he needed to close up. Just as he looked up he saw Melissa take her headset off. It's closing time. Izuku said. Well that's fair. I need to call my uncle to pick me up. Is it alright if I stay inside while I wait? Melissa asked. That's alright. With that she had gone and made a quick call to her uncle and sat in the lounge area by the reception. Izuku himself got up and stretched as he went around, just tidying the area little by little. I know it's a little late, but what's your name? Melissa asked as he just began sweeping. He looked at her like a deer frozen in headlights. Oh my god, I never told you. The name is Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you Izuku. She said with a smile. Nice to meet you too. He said shyly, placing a hand to the back of his head. So how come you running a cafe? You look about the same age as me. It's a circumstance thing. I needed to do something after middle school and I made sure to get tested out this week. My sponsor offered me this as an opportunity and I took it. So it's not your dream to run a cafe? No, To be honest, I wanted to be a hero. Izuku sighed a little solemnly. How come? Melissa asked curiously. I'm quirkless, he revealed, wincing at the possibility of disgust from her. Told I couldn't be a hero and that it was unrealistic. I get that. Izuku looked at her curiously. I'm a late bloomer myself. I only realized I had a quirk when my uncle mentioned it may be similar to his own. Really, that's kind of wild, never heard of a late bloomer in their teens. Yep, the doctors were surprised to hear there's a good chance I'm a late bloomer too. Anyways, who said you couldn't be a hero, or is that me prying too much? Nah, I've made peace with it. It was Al Dash. As he was about to finish his sentence, Melissa's phone rang. So sorry, Izuku. That's fine. She picked up the phone and began to talk to the person over the phone. It seems my uncle is outside. Got it, hope you get home safe, he said with a smile that Melissa felt briefly blinding her. As she headed out, he went to lock the door and saw what seemed to be a very familiar, emaciated man in the front seat. All Might, he thought. Nope, probably a coincidence. Quickly dismissing the thought, he quickly messaged his mother he may be late due to closing a little late on the first day and checking the upstairs apartment. Heading upstairs after Melissa left, he was greeted by a very modern kitchen and dining area. The entire place felt incredibly sleek and cozy at the same time. He began to head towards what he assumed was the bedroom and was greeted by a king-sized bed. Exhausted, he sent one message saying he was going to stay in the upstairs apartment for the night and fell asleep. Kurogiri, where are my jeans and t-shirts? Tamura asked his long-term assistant and caretaker. Tamura in the wardrobe to the left. Why? Kurogiri questioned. I need an outfit that looks decent since I'm meeting up with some friends. Now this made Kurogiri stop polishing the glass he had in his hand as he quickly turned to face Tamura. You are meeting up with friends? He said, baffled. Clicking his tongue, annoyed. Tamura replied, no need to sound surprised. But I've got some friends to meet up with this Wednesday. Where are you meeting? Kurogiri pressed further. Just a gaming cafe run by a friend of mine. Kurogiri set down his glass on the countertop. We are getting you an outfit sorted now. With that, Tamura was then subjected to an hour and a half of Kurogiri having him trying numerous different outfits till he found one that looked nice. A set of gray jeans with a black turtleneck to hide his scratch marks and a red hoodie to match his red high tops. From out of nowhere, Kurogiri provided him with leather gloves that had been made to cover 2 fingers to avoid him disintegrating. The misty man wiped a non-existent tear from his eyes at the outfit he managed to concoct from Tamura's lack of selection. Realizing how monumental this was, he decided to inform the emster. Tamura, I'm going to speak with him here now, but could you quickly tell me where the cafe is? Alright, it's on Hero Street in Mustafu. Thank you. Now make sure not to ruin that outfit or you will have to wear one of MSDR's ironic shirts as punishment. Kurogiri shuddered at the memory of MSDR's shirts with statements like, breathes, running clothes, and villain outfit. Stepping through a portal, he was greeted by a well-lit room where his MST are sat working on documents and the sort to manage his companies out of Japan. He turned to greet Kurogiri as he entered. Kurogiri, what brings you here today? The emissary said. I'm here to inform you it seems young Tamura is going out on an excursion to meet his friends on the upcoming Wednesday. It seems that he's slowly building some social skills. That's wonderful news. Better late than never, but pray tell where he plans to go. It seems like a gaming cafe in Mustafu. The one on Hero Street? The emissary asked. That is the exact one. Is there an issue with the venue? No, it's fine. Just make sure he gets there safely and does not use his quirk in the venue whatsoever. We cannot have him risk being found too soon. Understood. With that, Kurogiri headed back out to the bar. All for one smiled at the thought. It seemed my boys were already acquainted with each other. I should go see Inko that day then. Izuku's Tuesday had gone by quite quickly as it was Melissa there again. Though there were a couple students that tried it out, unfortunately getting too scared by the immersion mode and sticking to its normal version. They enjoyed it, but it did not look like they planned on coming back anytime soon, so he quickly checked his mission status. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, Opening Week. Time remaining for completion, 5 days. Description: you now have a store which the system will be renovating tonight. Open the store within a week and ready for business. Criteria: 1/1 obtain 1 paying customer. 24250/60,000 earn 60,000 yen. Rewards: 2 stat point. Drink unlocked. Coca-Cola price, 400 yen per bottle. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission. User will lose allocated stat points. Active. He was wondering what to do to get more customers. At least he would finally meet his friends tomorrow. Getting up, he decided to start cleaning up the shop so he could close and leave without anything else to do. But as he was sweeping, he heard someone entering. As he turned around, he saw his mother smiling. "Mom," he said, going to hug her. "Why can't I visit my own son while he's working?" She fake pouted at him. He chuckled. "No, it's fine. I was cleaning up since we close in an hour or so. Melissa left earlier." Inko's eyes narrowed slyly. "Izuku, who's Melissa?" She had a grin on her face. "She's just a customer that came here consistently for the past 2 days. That's all." Inko hums with a tone of suyer. Fumbling in his pocket, he pulls out a key loop. "This is for the apartment upstairs. The franchise group had it furnished as a part of the contract, and because I got a property quickly." "That's nice of them. Let me just put these dishes I made upstairs." With that, she headed to the apartment. Soon it struck 10 and he decided to close the shop for the night. Going upstairs, he could smell the food that his mother had made being heated up on the stove with a couple plates set. His mouth started to drool a little at the scent of katsudon in the air. "Mom, that smells great. How long till it's heated?" "Just a couple minutes." At that moment her phone began to ring. "Izuku, can you answer the call, sweetie?" Reaching for the phone, he saw it said, "Hisashi," and he answered. "Hey Dad." "Izuku, how are you? Also, where is your mother?" His father asked. "I'm fine. We are in the cafe apartment about to eat dinner." The cafe had an apartment? That's nice. "Anyways, I need to tell your mother something quickly." "Okay, can we talk a little later when you are done?" "Of course." With that, he passed the phone to his mother. "Hisashi, what did you need to talk about, darling?" While his parents talked, he decided to get changed into some clothing that he had brought with him in case he needed to stay in the apartment more often. While he was pulling on a t-shirt, his mother made an excited shrill. Panicking, t-shirt half on, he appeared in the main living area and looked at his mother. "Mom, what happened?" "Izuku, your dad is visiting tomorrow. He'll be here for a few days." "Really?" Izuku was incredibly excited at the prospect of seeing his father. He knew his dad had been recovering in America and he lost his sight from the accident. Somehow Dad managed to get a friend of his to use his quirk on him that allowed him to see, albeit in only a small radius around him. Izuku didn't care about the logistics, even if he was curious about a quirk that could partially solve blindness. He was happy his dad could still see. "Izuku, Hisashi wants to talk to you." He took the phone and his dad started asking him about his day and how the cafe was. Slowly time ticked by as he and his father discussed the struggles of his newly opened cafe and the fact his father was planning to try out the game system. Izuku's alarm began to beep, flashing 7 o'clock into his face as he squinted at the harsh red. Knowing he had to get up, he jumped out of bed and stretched his joints, clicking in response. Getting up, he headed to the bathroom, greeting Inko, who had begun to make some breakfast for the both of them. "Morning, Izuku, breakfast will be done in a second. Just clean up and we can eat." She chimed from the kitchen. "Okay, Mum," he said groggily. After brushing his teeth and taming his hair into a slightly less unruly bush, he sat down and ate his breakfast. Checking his watch, he realized opening was in about 10 minutes and he needed to get to the store. "Mum, I'm going to head down to open up for the day." "Okay, I'm going to head to call Hisashi. He should be off the plane by now." With that, he headed downstairs, watching the room illuminate, and unlocked the front door. With it being so early in the morning, it should be pretty quiet, so he decided to play some Resident Evil. After all, he needed to refine his knife skills. Once he was Chris, he felt the knife in his palm and began to go through a few drills till he was mentally ready. Then he began to play slicing zombies and hounds that lunged at him by ducking and weaving through. As they lunged or swung at him, they would be his for the taking, getting in close to deal a fatal blow. Sometimes he would switch to his pistol aimed only ever at the head to conserve bullets and make his fights a little easier. That was till he faced his first hunter. The beast was burly and much taller than him, and it came towards him with speed. Its claws slashing the air in front inches from his face as spit flung from its maw. Fear shook him. Look at the reptilian creature. He went to get in close and was simply greeted by game over. He just was not fast enough to even hit it. Taking his headset off for a breather, he was greeted by a smiling face of a man with a stature almost as tall as All Might, ivory curls like clouds, ruby eyes, and a face littered with freckles like his own. "Dad!" Izuku shouted, jumping up into his father's arms. "How are you doing, little sprout?" His father teased. "I'm not a sprout. But I'm doing good," he replied back, jokingly pouting at his father's nickname. "Now, is this the little cafe you've been working on? It's nice, and from what I see, that's Resident Evil." "You know Resident Evil?" "Of course I do. Me and your uncle used to play it when we were little." His father chuckled. Uncle Yoichi apparently died when he was young because of his health, according to his father. "I remember when I got my hands on a copy when our parents told us we were not allowed it. He adamantly chose to play and was left unable to sleep that day. Acting like I was a teddy bear, he clung to me so he could actually fall asleep. All I knew about Resident Evil was that it sounded like Resident Villain and that the game was super realistic in this version." "Really?" His father sounded amused. "Let me try the game." Izuku scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "You still need to pay." "Cafe policy?" "Yeah. How much is it?" "Well, I'd recommend the iron if you are trying out, but if you want to play for a while, then silver at least, since you get some hours at a discounted price." Always the salesman. "Good to see you have my qualities in making deals." "Thanks, Dad. I'll get a gold membership. After all, a good father supports his son's endeavors, and I have more than enough money to spare at this point." "Okay, 1 gold membership and 1 game activation is 28,750 yen. With that, Hisashi swiped his black debit card on the scanner and paid. "Now let's see what it's like," he said, sitting excited in the chair. "By the way, Dad, it is really realistic, as in you can feel pain and also a lot of close quarters combat." "Izuku, I'll be fine. I was watching you play, so I should have this down." "Got it." With it, he watched his father place the headset on with the eagerness of a child on Christmas Day. Hisashi had entered the game and was greeted by the same screen as Izuku, but chose his own character. The character was a mirror of himself in reality, but with tactical gear and a knife in his hand alongside a pistol in a holster. To say his father was good at the game would be a gross understatement. It was as if he had held a knife his entire life. The fluidity of each slice held precision a surgeon would be tough to beat, and had the agility to duck and weave each attack. At times his father would stutter or trip, but it seemed more as if his father expected more out of the body than it was performing. Almost as if he was limited by the body and not himself. Within an hour of playing, he hacked and slashed his way to an explosive finale with the rocket launcher. It all took no more than maybe 50 minutes. Taking his headset off, he had the smuggest grin alive. "Not my best time for Resident Evil, but that was amazing, Izuku. It felt real and my senses tingled at the sensation of the environment. You really are lucky to have scored this." "Dad, how?" "Son, did you forget your old man is a certified professional in CQC? I trained in it to better analyze fighting skills to apply them to my analysis works. Also, I've played the game before. It's good to see it ironed out the bugs and kept itself true to the original. I wish your uncle could see this." "Hisashi," came a voice from the back near the stairs to the upper floor. "Sweetie, I'm here." "Surprise." He waved his hands at the end. "I got a little excited trying out the game. I missed seeing you so much." Inko cried, tackling her husband, who fortunately braced himself for it. "Now, my dear, how about we go out on a date today? We can go shopping for some clothes for my stay and then grab lunch. Maybe a movie and then some more shopping along with finally grabbing dinner." "That would be lovely. Let's head to the apartment so I can grab something nicer to wear." "Darling, you would look wonderful in anything you wear." "Oh shush. I'm not as great as I used to be." Izuku slowly began slinking back to his desk while they flirted. However, it seemed his parents realized he felt awkward and started laughing. Okay, Izuku, we will be back later. Anything you want us to grab for dinner to bring you? Some katsudon, please? Izuku, you need to learn to like more things. You've loved katsudon since you could eat it. But that's fine, we will be back around 10 tonight. Izuku waved them off as he watched them head out. Checking his phone, he was greeted by a few notifications from his friends. With a smile, he opened up the app. Greenmite is now online. Splitter, Green, see you at 1 p.m. Scales and Blades, may run a little late but around 1 p.m. too. Dusty Boy, I may get there a little early but yeah, same here. See you at 1 p.m. Shocks 420, I'm so jealous. Guys, make sure to post a selfie in the chat so I can see what you all look like. Splitter, got it. Greenmite, see you at 1 p.m. He glanced at his stat sheet, marveling at its growth. Name, Midoriya Izuku, user 0002. Current privilege rank, Tier 1. Privileges noted. Can view stat page. Renovation access, T1. Access to Resident Evil. Can add stat points to stat sheet. Current accessible game library. Resident Evil 1. Sits, 0 points to add. Strength, 14, can do push-ups easily. Dexterity, 17, can thread a needle all of the time. Intelligence, 18, smarter than most without intelligence quirks. Constitution, 15, can run a full of a mile with ease. Realm, early body forging, beginning of this sprout. Realm progression, 15.3, just starting out. Skills, high-speed speech, rapid analysis, low-mid-tier parallel processing, mid-level CQC, mid-level knife combat, mid-level firearm usage. Inventory items. Then his current quest progression. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, opening week. Time remaining for completion, 5 days. Description, you now have a store which the system will be renovating tonight. Open the store within a week and ready for business. Criteria, 1/1 obtain 1 paying customer. 53,000/60,000 earn 60,000 yen. Rewards, 2 stat point. Drink unlocked, Coca-Cola price, 400 yen per bottle. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission. User will lose allocated stat points. Active. Grinning, he was so close to unlocking his first drink. After all, killing zombies and dying is thirsty work. Then he might begin getting more quests as well. Eagerly he waited for his friends by killing time doing some light revision for his exam. Thankfully he had already covered the curriculum in his own time due to the absolute incompetence of his teachers. It irritated him and annoyed him to no end, but it at least allowed him to become better. Soon he heard the door open and was greeted by a taller teenager who almost looked a little too much like Dad. Honestly, if he had freckles and did not have eczema, he could pass off as a younger version of his dad with long hair that was tinted light blue. On his hands were a pair of specially made 5-point contact gloves that covered his pinky and middle finger. Then it struck him, Dusty had a 5-point contact quirk. Dusty? He asked curiously. Rude. The teen snorted, making Izuku panic. Greenie, it's me. You but, scaring me like that. God, if I called an actual customer Dusty they might smack me. Wow, calling a paying customer and but, how professional. Shush. Anyways, my name is Izuku Midoriya aka Greenmite. Midoriya, that's almost too perfect a last name. Well, my IRL tag is Tamura Shigaraki. But that's a little too edgy, so call me Tenko. Got it, Tenko. Izuku said with a grin. At that moment the door opened again, and they were greeted by a girl with green hair and a sharp grin. Green? Dusty, you guys? She asked in anticipation. Splitter? They both asked. Her smile widened as she tackled them both in a hug. It is you guys. The name's Setsuna Tokage. Nice, I'm Izuku and he's Tenko. Are we waiting on Scales? Almost as if by magic the door opened again. Greeting them was a lizard with purple hair tied into a ponytail wearing jeans and an edge-shot t-shirt. You guys who I think you are? Yep, Dusty is Tenko, Greenie is Izuku and I'm Splitter aka Setsuna. She finished by pointing at herself. Well, the name's Shuichi Iguchi, but I do go by the nickname Spinner. With that they began to talk for a little while getting to know how old everyone was and what they did. Tenko was under an apprenticeship with his dad, and Iguchi was a medical student having been taking a break after getting his medical degree and looking for a job, which was quite difficult for him as a complex mutant. Setsuna was a middle schooler like Izuku about to go into her recommendation exam, having been recommended by her uncle Iko, who she liked to hide his identity because he was fond of his private life staying private. She was staying with him as she prepared for the recommendation exam in a couple weeks. So, Izuku, can we try out the games then? Setsuna asked. Yeah, we currently have one game available. It's a single-player game called Resident Evil. The first hour is 2,250 yen if you choose to get a membership. I'll probably just get an iron membership and an hour. Iguchi replied, heading to the counter to pay. Same here, Setsuna responded. I'm going to get a silver membership. This Ms. any good as the original, I'll probably be here for a while. Tenko remarked. You played the original? Izuku asked. Yeah, only a little though. The game scared me as a kid and I accidentally destroyed a controller and Dad suggested I play when I'm a little older. Mainly because the controllers are super rare. That's fair. Did you not have gloves back then? I did, but if I got scared enough my quirk could trigger through gloves. It's a stress factor thing because of how I developed my quirk before my dad found me. Found you? I'm adopted. Cool. With that they ended the conversation and the three, having paid, all sat at their respective booths and put on the headset. As they loaded up the game and got comfortable, Izuku looked happily at his menu and saw his quest. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, opening week. Time remaining for completion, 5 days. Description: you now have a store which the system will be renovating tonight. Open the store within a week and ready for business. Criteria: 1/1 obtain 1 paying customer. 60,000/60,000 earns 60,000 yen. Rewards: 2 stat point. Drink unlocked. Coca-Cola price, 400 yen per bottle. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission. User will lose allocated stat points. Completed. Congratulations host, you finished the quest and the secondary objective as well. The system chimed. The secondary objective? Izuku questioned. Fill all 3 seats at once. Can I see the quest for that? Of course. The system then displayed it in front. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, Full House. Time remaining for completion, 4 days. Description: you have opened the cafe, now try and get all seats filled at once at least once this week. Criteria: 3/3 seats filled. Rewards: 2x Hypertech certified immersion rigs. Membership discounts, drink discounts. Game unlocked, Destiny 2, Hypertech Edition. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission, no penalty. Completed. A new game already? Izuku asked. Of course, variety is needed to make the cafe enjoyable. This one you can play with friends as well. Izuku's eyes shone. That's so cool. Wait, how are we gonna sell the Coke? Simple, the cooler by the reception. People can pay at the till and take a bottle. It's also only 250 yen for members. Also, I updated the board. Aren't I great? She remarked. Ah! Screamed Setsuna, taking off her headset. Her face pale with shock, looking over at Izuku. The hell was that? I forgot to mention. The game is calibrated to be as realistic as possible. That includes dying. Though you did last quite a bit longer than I did, do you feel any different? She clenched her fists together and her eyes shone. I feel stronger. Bingo! Basically, in order to get that realistic feeling, it also stimulates the body and that leads to it getting stronger. Izuku, that is so overpowered, what the hell? It's how it is. Now you want to play or watch Spinner die? Sheet! Spinner shouted, taking his headset off. What the hell, man? Could you warn me? Surprise! He said snarkily. Spin spin, you feel any different? Setsuna asked. Spin spin? But wait. With that his eyes also shone. Dude, I feel stronger. Not a lot, but I can feel it. It's so cool. Izuku said it's how the game works to make you feel the realistic sensations. That is unnaturally overpowered. What the hell, but hey, I'm gonna get another hour and keep playing. With that, Spinner jumped back in. Tenko was still focused and Izuku was surprised he kept his focus even after dying. Whenever he started to focus he went silent and all he thought about was winning. So Izuku chose not to disturb him. Everyone was focused on their own games and Izuku chose to try and fight the hunter like his dad had. Slowly sinking into the game for an hour. Until he was notified that Spinner wanted to talk to him. Taking his headset off he looked at him. Sup, Spinner, what's wrong? I'm going to head out since I need to get a train. But I want us all to take a selfie quickly. Definitely. With that, Izuku got the others' attention and together took a selfie, posting it onto the group chat to Shock's envy. Hey guys. Frozen here with some news for all fics being released. They will all be released on a monthly/bi-monthly schedule aiming around 1 or 2 chapters with at least 1,000 words minimum a chapter. The reason for this is simple. I am happy to announce a few new fics that will be in the works and planning on releasing them in the next couple months at most. Heroic Model Creator, MCX Godly Model Creator. My Pocket Dimension Academia, MCX Pocket Hunting Dimension. I'm not the bad guy, Izuku being mistaken for AFO Online. Blink and he's gone. Izuku has a teleportation quirk. Diablo Academia rewritten, a rewrite of Diablo Academia. The first 2 will belong to a newly released series called My Web Academia, based around web novel X MHA crossovers. If you want a beta read or get an early glimpse alongside other bonuses including deciding what appears next in some fics, join my Discord, https://discord.gg/dnudvfsh. Hope to see you in the server and happy exam season. Izuku waved at his friends as they used their time allowances for the day and decided to head home, smiling at Setsuna promising to show up at least weekly once she was in UA and Tenko promising to visit as many times as he can. He had gotten hooked onto the game and said he felt like the benefit of leveling up IRL was too good to skip. Iguchi would try to visit monthly, but as a recent graduate struggling to find a job it was difficult. Once the cafe reaches the total of 15 computers, the host will be permitted to hire a receptionist if they choose to do so. The system chimed, reading his mind. Izuku hummed in acknowledgement. He was worried, however, at the slow pace his cafe was growing at. Thankfully, adding the drinks he had unlocked would mean he could earn some more revenue as well as the larger seating availability he would get tomorrow with the new game release. Sitting at the desk, he started drawing in his notebook till he heard the door open again a little while later. His lips curled into a small smile seeing Melissa here again. Afternoon, Melissa, what do you plan on doing today? She smiled back at him. I'll just play Resident Evil again. I think I'll be able to pass where I'm stuck today. Looking at the sign, her eyes trailed to the bottom of it. You've got drinks on sale now? Izuku nodded in response. We only have Coca-Cola available. For members it's 300 yen instead of the usual 400 yen. Do you want a bottle? Yep, I'll get that and my usual activation of Resident Evil on computer 1. She swiped her card onto the scanner and smiled, taking the bottle of Coke and sitting at her seat. Once she took a sip of the Coke, her eyes widened as she seemed to try and suppress a squeal of glee. Her head whipped around so fast Izuku was almost afraid it would fall off as she looked at him. Izuku, what's in this Coke? It tastes amazing? Izuku looked at her a little confused as he made his way to the mini fridge. It should just be normal Coke, let me try a sip. Taking a bottle, he popped off the cap and took a sip. The bubbles of the cola tingled his tongue as he felt the sweet and tangy flavor of the lemon and sugar mix along with the other flavors. Whatever was in this made it taste divine as the sensation of it made his body feel electrified. System, what the hell is in this Coke? Is it actual Coke? He questioned in his head. The system seemed to huff. This system would never resort to putting drags into their drinks for taste. I did not even bother putting in the caffeine. But know the flavors you are tasting are all sourced from high-grade ingredients produced by the system. Honey from the hives of ether bees in the celestial realm and the spring waters of Cerelia. Drink enough of this and you'll slowly begin feeling its passive regenerative properties. It is essentially a medicinal drink at the level it's been produced. She seemed proud of the cola she had made. This won't have any negative impacts, right? Izuku questioned, hearing it being considered medicinal. Of course not. This appealing system put in all the right measures to prevent such a thing. Izuku regained his focus from talking with the system in his head to be greeted by Melissa waving a hand in front of his face. Midoriya, you awake? She asked a little too close to his face. He yelped and bounced back. Sorry, my sponsor has a telepathic quirk. When I started wondering about the Coke, it sent me a message about it. It does leave me zoned out. He quickly shot out the lie to cover the fact he was talking to the system. Melissa took a step back, no longer leaning over the counter near his face. That makes sense. But what did they say about the Coke? Izuku shrugged, not wanting to say the whimsical truth behind the drink. It's simply my sponsor's company's personal cola brew. The ingredients are honestly a little excessively high quality, but they do love perfection. That I do. The system chimed in his head. Oh, that does explain how good it is. Well, I'm going to continue playing then. She slips on her headset and continues to play, occasionally sipping at her drink. While Izuku is there bored, he decides to kill some time till closing by playing as well. Eventually the time slips past the both of them as it's 10 o'clock at night when the system reminds Izuku he should close for the night. Taking his headset off, he sees Melissa just about taking her one off as she seems to be clenching her fist, almost surprised. It seems she's been leveling up and had only just realized it. He smiles as he waves her off, only to collide into a mountain of a man at the door. Melissa looks up to see a man holding a little girl identical to him with white hair and red eyes, but while his hair is curly, the little girl's is straight. She seemed scared of Melissa, who crashed into what she assumed to be her dad and held on to him tightly. Sorry for bumping into you, miss. The man apologized. It was my fault, I should be more careful. She then wondered why the man was entering the cafe with a child at closing time. You do know it's about to close? The man chuckles as his wife, a viridian hair and eyed woman looking a lot like Izuku, appears. We know, our son runs the place. He points to Izuku, who is scrambling to get to his parents from behind the counter. Nice to meet a clearly dedicated customer of the cafe. I am Midoriya Hisashi. He put his free hand out for a handshake. Melissa replied, nice to meet you. I'm Melissa Shield. However, as she shook his hand, one for all resonated in her body, sparking up as it seemed determined to crush the man's hand. Panicking, she pulled away. Sorry, Quirk Troubles. She saw he was unfazed by what was essentially one for all crushing his hand and seemed unharmed. I can imagine little Eri here has a similar problem. Don't you, little unicorn? The little girl seemed embarrassed by his teasing and hid her face against his shirt. It's embarrassing, but I was a late bloom dash. She was cut off by a notification. Oh, my uncle is here to pick me up. It was nice meeting you. As she walked away to her uncle's car, she pondered why one for all acted as it did. But she was happy because after playing the game she felt herself actually feel much stronger, and even Grandpa Torino agreed she was building strength quickly in the past couple days, above average. Nice meeting you, dearie, replied the lady who Melissa assumed to be Midoriya's mum. Eventually Melissa is heading out of the store, and once she's gone in her uncle's car, Izuku breaks the ice. Dad, who is that? He says, pointing to Eri. Your new little sister, he says, proudly showing Eri off to Izuku as she giggles. Izuku, it's a long story. His mum interjects. Inko took Eri from Hisashi and carried her upstairs to tuck her into bed, and so the two of them decided to sit at the dining table in the apartment. Dad, are you going to explain how I ended up with a new sister? Izuku was a little overwhelmed by everything. Hisashi smiled and sighed with a sorrowful gaze. She was running away from a bad man. A Yakuza member that I recognized from some old connections. You remember me talking about Yoichi? That he was always sick and frail growing up before he died? He knew this was a subject his father hated bringing up. Eri had those same eyes that wanted to live, No more than a hospital bed to grow up happily. Izuku was covered in scars across her body that were things a child should never know. Hisashi's voice shaked with disdain throughout. So you saved her from him? Izuku was wondering why the tone was so somber. I did. He answered with a soft smile. So isn't the Yakuza going to be after you because of this? Realization hit him as he wondered how his father would deal with angering the Yakuza. Izuku, he won't be a problem. There was a grim chuckle that brought an assurance to a permanent solution. Dad, what did you do? Izuku felt a seed of dread grow in throat as his father's red eyes flashed with a cruel glimmer. Promise you won't be afraid? His face turned to one of hope and caution. Izuku gulped nervously and nodded. Okay. I killed him, Izuku. That's the truth of the matter. The bluntness almost made it seem like Hisashi joked about it. His brain went blank. His father, the kind man who loved to laugh and share stories of his childhood, killed a man? Does Mum know? Izuku asked, wondering how he would have been able to save his new sister and kill the Yakuza. Hisashi just nodded. How can you both come home so easily knowing that you killed a man? His voice trembled at the prospect that he may have never known who his parents actually were. Because there's things so much worse that your mother knows about me. Hisashi locked eyes with Izuku and then took a deep breath. So you are using hypertech? I'll be honest, I didn't think you would receive a system as well. Do you want to talk about the day you got yours? Izuku's blood went cold and the color drained from his face. What do you mean, system? Trying his best, he feigned ignorance. Izuku, don't lie to me. You had always been a careful child even if you had a reckless streak that contradicted it. Choosing a cafe out of nowhere doesn't make sense. Hisashi seemed adamant to extract the truth from him. Izuku bit his lip, not wanting to admit the truth of that day. I wanted to die. Everything felt hopeless and being rejected from every school just felt like it locked out any hope. Then I woke up in that dash, he's cut off by a jolting pain in his head. Host is not permitted to talk about the system with others. The system rang out. Hisashi placed a hand on his shoulder and soon a warm feeling soothed the shock he felt. Then Izuku realized he had not even seen his father get up from his chair. I forget new users cannot talk about their systems. Sorry I wasn't here to be by your side when you felt like that. He wrapped his arms around Izuku and just hugged him. It felt like the emotions he kept holding into lies to himself and to others that he was distracted with the system came washing over him. Inko stood at the door frame with a sorrowful expression, not daring to step into the movement. She had her suspicions, but she would rather not confirm them. After all, the system only latches on those in despair. If Izuku was pushed to that brink, she failed her role as a mother. Slowly the tears stopped and he wiped away the rest of them. I'm sorry for crying, Dad. Hisashi just gave a comforting smile and ruffled his hair. Even the strongest have to cry sometimes. But is your system just focused on the cafe? At least see if you can confess that. Hesitantly he nodded and Hisashi seemed to relax. I was scared that you may have in fact gained the cafe as a simple step into the next stage. Izuku was confused at first because his father knew about the system, but it seemed he knew so much more. What do you mean next stage? I guess I better share the system that I'm assigned to? Monarch of villainy, it's been this way for 200 years. Hisashi said with a grim expression. Villainy, what do you mean? Are you a villain? His father was not only a system user but also a villain. Izuku, tell me if you recognize the name All for One? Hisashi held only the utmost sincerity in his question as if already knew the answer. Izuku, growing up quirkless in a place filled with quirks and where he as an outlier was desperate to fit in, tried every method to be a hero. Scouring the internet growing up, there were tales amongst the quirkless of a paragon, or devil, a being that if you made a deal with you could get a quirk and finally be normal. The name of that entity was All for One, a being who at a touch could deprive a person of a quirk and grant one for another. A boogeyman inscribed into the old wives' tales and warnings given to children. After all, imagine the chaos a man who could take quirks could cause. What does that have to do with everything? He asked, not wanting to know his father's reply. You can already guess. Hisashi stood up and went to the kitchen and put the kettle on as they stayed where they were for a few moments. Then Izuku felt a softer hand on his shoulder and his mum looked at him with sympathy. "Zuku, I know you must be feeling overwhelmed, but your father isn't a bad man." Inko reassured him as Hisashi placed a cup of tea beside the two of them. He just had a lot of difficult choices to make. Hisashi sat back down with his own tea. "I'm telling you all of this because I need you to know that no matter the assignment you're given, I want to help you. I know how cruel the missions can be. Dad, if you could give quirks, why did you never give me one?" Izuku thought he had accepted his quirklessness, but it was apparent that was another lie. "I could have been normal, I could have played with the other kids." He had been interrupted by a small hiccup. "Kaken would still be my friend." "Izuku, I wanted to, but the fact is your body is completely incapable of handling a quirk." Guess he really was a dad after all? Izuku, stop that, I can see what's happening. You aren't useless or lesser because you have no quirk. You're my baby boy and you're perfect as you are. He was kneeled down by Izuku and put a hand to his cheek. "Besides, you have a system, you'll be better than any quirk no matter what you do." Izuku smiled a little at his father's words. "Thanks, Dad. I'm just trying to process everything. You have a system, are 200 at least, a villain, killed a man today, adopted a new child, and my body is literally physically incapable of even obtaining a quirk through means that sound like fiction." Hisashi chuckled, not a grim one but one of pure amusement. "You say that like humanity had not spent millennia seeing supernatural powers like quirks themselves as fiction. Now what do you say you sleep on this new information and we call it a day?" Izuku nodded. The violent amount of emotional stress was too much, but one question did sit in his mind. "Dad, what's my sister's name?" Hisashi looked at him dumbly before bursting out laughing. "I can't believe I forgot to tell you her name. She's Eri and she's the newest Midoriya." Izuku happily went to his room to sleep and process everything he was told as Hisashi and Inko looked at each other. "You haven't told him any of the things he needed to know and just threw all the most obscure things about you at once. You'll need to tell him about Tamura or how you are dying." Inko had tears in her eyes as she held her husband. "I'll tell him in time, just let him keep the innocence of his new friend and let him be happy. He needed to know he would not have to persist with the whims of the system on his own. You remember how many times it ruined our date nights?" He joked as he hugged his beloved wife. "Don't remind me." Inko laughed, crying in his arms as they enjoyed each other's presence. Her husband was still with her, and all that dread she felt in the last 5 years after his battle was gone. For now she would happily enjoy the fact her family had gotten a little larger and now they could be a proper family. After all, Eri had mistakenly solved the injuries of her husband, and that little ray of sunshine would make a wonderful addition to the overly emotional family of 6. Even if 2 of them did not even know they were in the family. To say Izuku handled his father being a system user and villain well would be a lie, a total and blatant lie. The poor boy was now awake at 5 in the morning contemplating everything he knew. What made it worse was Izuku connected the dots, and the only villain that possibly could harm All Might was probably his dad. This spiral kept getting worse as he made his way down to the cafe only to be distracted by a familiar chime. "System is detecting high levels of stress from user. Relaxation is recommended," the system said in a rather concerned and softened voice. "If you like, you can try out the new game available. It is fully initialized." That snapped Izuku out of the spiral. The new game. "It's Destiny 2, if I remember right." "That is correct. Destiny 2 is a sci-fi guy set about 600 years into the future from now. A looter-shooter with a varied skill system and a plethora of worlds to explore. The system has expanded each planet and fully enhanced them, so you will have an entire solar system and more to travel through." The system's tone clearly grew with her pride as she got to bragging. It was kind of endearing how she felt so much pride for her work, earning a chuckle from Izuku. "Guess I need to see how much work you put into this, right?" he said with a smile, sitting at the station with a grin, looking at the 2 new setups further into the store. Putting on his headset, the game brought him to a selection screen. "Human, recommended. Woken." Curiously, Izuku wondered why human was the recommended selection for him besides the fact he was human. Yet almost as if she was reading his mind, the system chimed in again. Human allows for you to have the best biological integration and will allow you to have a body type closest to yourself physically. It will help in stat growth and learning skills. Hence why you should pick it. So, humans are the best. With a curt nod he selected it and was greeted by a blindingly bright light. Waking up, his head spun as he saw a new selection. Still a little dazed, he clicked on Titan. With that, the spinning stopped and he was greeted by a floating box? "A Lightbearer, you're awake." The voice was oddly chirpy as it whistled and spun around him. Standing up from where he sat, he was surrounded by countless rusted and aged cars. Confused, he looked at the box. "Where am I?" he asked, still trying not to throw up. Everything felt weird, like he was being hit by the sensation of energy surging inside him. "You're in the Cosmodrome or, well, just outside it. Anyways, we need to get moving soon." Moving? He was cut off by a loud roaring noise that reverberated through the entirety of the cars and seemed to be behind him. "That is what we need you to get running from. Getting into the Cosmodrome is your best bet, so get to running." Nodding frantically, he moved through the rusted cars, not wanting to find out what made that noise. He looked behind him to see a rumbling rushing of clouds that seemed to move as a single mass as he sprinted into the Cosmodrome and began his new adventure as a Titan. It was around 9 in the morning by the time Izuku actually took off his headset. The stress he felt about his father's past and the fact his father had reduced All Might to a living balloon was somewhat dampened. Yawning, he decided to go upstairs and make some breakfast. Still a little sleepy, he glanced at his current status. Name: Midoriya Izuku, user 0002. Current privilege rank, Tier 1. Privileges noted. Can view stat page. Renovation access, T1. Access to Resident Evil. Can add stat points to stat sheet. Current accessible game library. Resident Evil 1. Destiny 2. Sits, 0 points to add. Strength, 20, can break a bone with a punch. Dexterity, 17, can thread a needle all of the time. Intelligence, 18, smarter than most without intelligence quirks. Constitution, 18, can run several miles with ease. Realm, early body forging, beginning of this sprout. Realm progression, 18.25, just growing up a little. Skills, high-speed speech, rapid analysis, low mid-tier parallel processing, mid-level CQC, mid-level knife combat, mid-level firearm usage, arc intuition, dynamic vision. Inventory items. He grinned looking at how quickly his stats had grown. Picking Titan gave him a higher focus on strength and constitution. Also, the satisfaction of punching things flying was great. Looking at his skills, he was a little sad his skill did not grow as high. It was most likely his skills crossed over from Resident Evil, as he had found he had a much easier time handling the aliens he fought due to his prior gaming experience. He shuddered thinking of how hard it would have been to handle them without knowing how to even use a gun before. Stepping into the apartment, he smiled seeing his dad in that iconic frilly pink apron that Izuku and his mom got him for his birthday when he was little. Covered in patchwork and a little faded, his dad wore it with pride and even stitched his iconic style of jeans on the front. Eri was sitting on Inko's lap as she braided her hair, while Hisashi was busy making quite the stack of pancakes to one side. The three of them all saw Izuku heading up and Hisashi sighed. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, plating the pancakes a little too high for what would be safe for such a stack. Izuku nodded as he sat down. Eri looked at Izuku a little uncomfortable with him, but that was just because they had met only the night before. Eri hopped off Inko's lap and tugged Izuku's sleeve as he looked to her sleepy. "Mr. Cloud said you're my new brother now." That took Izuku a second to process, and he saw Eri glancing at Hisashi and he smiled, pushing his seat back and picking her up. "That's right, I'm your big brother. Mr. Cloud is Hisashi, or also known as Dad. What do you call Mum?" He gestured to Inko. "Mum." Eri said, a little confused as to what else she would call someone as motherly as Inko. Izuku smiled with a wide grin as he lifted her up to her happy little squeals. "And what do you call me?" Giggling, she grins and hugs. Brother Bush. Aren't you cheeky? But yes, I'll be your Brother Bush. His eyes glanced over her arms and he looked at the scars. Eri was happy, he could tell she was clearly enjoying her new life as he sat her back down. But the fact she was fidgeting so much, and he looked to see her twiddling her fingers in a similar way he did. The little girl was riddled with so much tension, he could tell exactly what she was thinking. When will I wake up? He had those thoughts as well. After a particularly good day, it always felt like a dream, but the next day, almost as if to compensate for his joy, tomorrow would be so much worse. If what his dad said was right, she most likely was waiting for the ball to drop and her abuser to appear. Yet Izuku thought quietly, he's dead, and if anyone else tries to hurt her, I'll make sure they pay. He was brought out of his overprotective thoughts by a plate of pancakes being planted on the table. Looking up, he saw his father with his cheery grin. Good to see you have those same instincts. But remember, being too overprotective is also a bad thing. With that, he sat down, and so did Inko, as the small family of 4 all shared a breakfast of pancakes and all sorts of toppings. Most of the breakfast consisted of having Eri try a bite of every topping mix with the pancakes, to which she looked like a happy chipmunk enjoying every bite. Finishing it off with a glass of milk, she seemed happy, still sitting on Izuku's lap as she looked at his arms and frowned. Bush, did someone bad hurt you as well? She poked at his arms curiously over each of the scars. They look like stars. Izuku winced, not at pain but in recalling a thought of a person he had done his best to forget. I guess you could say that. Eri let out a little hiccup and seemed solemn, hearing the drop in Izuku's tone. Did Mr. Cloud punish him too? He didn't, Eri. Izuku replied, looking over to his dad, who seemed very tempted to go and visit a local stick of dynamite. Humph, why? Eri pouted. If Dad could beat up Mr. Kai, why not the person that hurt you? Well, I would love to, but he's not technically someone I can get rid of. Hisashi admitted through gritted teeth as Inko put a portion of pancake into his mouth before he grinded his own teeth down. And well, Izuku didn't tell us, and it's my fault that I didn't realize he was getting hurt. Inko admitted regretfully with a tearful look, as those scars were as much a scar to her as Izuku. A painful reminder of her inability to help him. Yet in that instant both Hisashi and Izuku spoke up. Mum/sweetheart, it isn't your fault. With a sigh, Izuku gave Eri to his dad to hold and held his mum's hand. I hid them from you because I knew you were busy working at the hospital, and telling you would only make it worse. You did everything you could, made sure to always be by my side, and do everything you can to make sure I grew up in a good childhood. She teared up with a smile. You're such a sweet boy. I can't believe anyone wanted to hurt you as much as Katsuki did. Getting up, she pulled Izuku to her with her quirk and hugged him. My baby boy, I think I should talk to Mitsuki about him. Izuku was about to protest when it dawned on him something completely different. Mom, when could you pull people with your quirk? At that moment, Hisashi and Inko both had wide eyes, as they also realized Inko just used her quirk to move a person easily 100 times heavier than what she is normally able to, and without any strain. I don't. No, I just felt upset and wanted to hug you. She blabbered, a little flustered by this. Eri looked at her brother being floated by Mum and giggled in Hisashi's lap. Mum, float me. Inko softened her gaze and laughed. All right, sweetie. With that, they spent another hour discovering how effective Inko's quirk had become, which led to Hisashi teleporting a 2-meter by 4-meter whiteboard into the living room as both son and father began rambling on quirk evolution. The only thing breaking the determined focus and the nap Eri and Inko were having on the sofa was a chime as Izuku snapped to it in focus. That's a customer. Dad, you keep trying to figure this out. Hisashi nodded earnestly, rambling again as he kept on trying to use every intelligence quirk to try and mentally comprehend what was arguably the most spontaneous growth of a quirk he had seen in 200 years. Izuku, however, was heading down as he was greeted. Waiting at the counter was a girl with pink dreadlocks and goggles grinning at him. Mei Hatume, at your service. Owner of Hatume Industries, can I try out a setup? She spoke almost too quickly for a normal person as Izuku nodded. With a professional smile on his face, he looked her confidently in the eyes and spoke. Welcome to Origin Internet Cafe. Would you like to sign up for a membership first? To describe his newest customer, Izuku only had one fitting word: insane. This was due to the fact he found out two very interesting things in the first 30 minutes of her playing Destiny. First was the fact mutation quirks are put towards exos and that the machine body would also include an attribute of the mutation. For Mei, her binocular eyes were added to the exo in a function that made them look like extending camera lenses. Second was the fact he watched at her screen as she sat down and proceeded to dismantle her guns after getting out what was essentially the tutorial area. The back workshop of the captain was taken over by her dismantling and modifying the guns. Which was fine because gun modifications were temperamental and she had to go and get new ones if they broke. Then she went and dug into her own exo-body and began taking out parts of her body before then healing herself and repeating this CY till she had a full exo-body, minus the head on the table. The fact this was only 30 minutes fed him with dread and a morbid fascination in her as she was rambling and cackling in that retro robotic voice her exo-body possessed. Any normal rational person would be concerned by the copious amounts of self-mutilation and experimentation she had just done. However, she just put down the money for the game and a gold membership immediately. Izuku decided he would just spectate her as she played and tidy his shop as well as appreciating the disturbingly large amount of cola she was drinking. He could not help but wonder where she was getting the money to do all of this. She looked like any steampunk inventor you would find out of a fantasy comic for starters, but was spending money without a care in the world. Honestly, the fact she drank about 18 bottles of Coke in the 6 hours scared him. Quickly doing the maths, he gulped. 47,250 yen in a single day. The fact she was spending so carelessly was impressive and did not help that system was clearly giddy about such a big spender. User, congratulations for hitting a jackpot customer. Also, would you like your new quest? She asked clearly, still overjoyed business of her user was doing so well. Izuku nodded and as Mei walked out all too hyper and getting all too close with assets that made any teen boy blush, he looked back to his mission window. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, user 0002. Missions pending. Mission name, adding to the population. That made Izuku halt and reread the title with an alarmed and flustered face. What is this mission about? He stammered as his mind raced by the hormonal thoughts that shot through his mind. The system sighed and just replied, read the rest. So Izuku did exactly that. Time remaining for completion, 1 month. Description: how can you have a MMO if there's no players? Criteria: 1/10 get 10 new players to play Destiny, 1/5 sell 5-month-long memberships to Destiny 2. Rewards: unlock food, Shin Ramen, 350 yen/300 yen. Game sync chamber. Unlock Destiny 2, raids and large-scale missions. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission: demotion of free game usage for host to discounted game usage. The disappointment of the system. Accept or deny. The loss of the free game usage would definitely be a detriment as Izuku needed to put money down for bills, food and other needs as it was. Having to put money down for gaming would definitely hurt his own bank account and his strength growth. While Izuku could ask his dad for money, he wanted to be both independent and self-sufficient also because he did not want to suffer the moral conflict of where his dad got money from. Secondly, it did make sense to strive to get more customers into his cafe, and the fact it was multiplayer meant it would be possible to get more things to do in Destiny and other games later on. Now, as Izuku was sitting there thinking of ways to solve his newest dilemma, on the other side of Mustafu, a rather spry and erratic pink-haired inventor was now bouncing around her workshop desperately drawing up schematics from what she dissected of her exo. Sitting at her drawing table, she was muttering, cursing, and sketching at breakneck speeds. Why won't this work? The mechanisms worked in the virtual game, and in theory there is nothing wrong. What am I missing? Groaning, she distracted herself with working on servos for a robotic arm she already began prototyping. The exos had a full range of human-like movement, and even more so, she was working hard to get this part down. However, due to a couple overcharged capacitors, messy solder, and the fact she was now 3 hours deep into this and coming down off the sugar high, she hit her head on the table. Why isn't this working? Groaning, she kept fiddling with the arm trying to figure out the issue. At that moment, a short man, maybe her height or just below, came in with a glass of chocolate milk and cookies and sat down on the chair before placing the snacks on the table. Mei, what's got you so antsy that you have not even eaten yet? You went out all day and came home only to immediately lock yourself in the workshop. The brown-haired man sighed, eating a cookie. Mei looked at him and then took a cookie and the glass of milk before downing it. So, Uncle Higuri, I'm trying to get this design working. It's bugging me because I saw it in a video game and dissected it. But even as I made it basically a carbon copy, it won't work. Hearing his niece's troubles, he thought about what she said and thoughtfully replied. Have you considered, because it came from a video game, that physics works differently and won't always translate the same even if it looks like it should? Mei nodded. I did that, but even then it was still hard to figure out anything. The servos look simple, but they keep locking up and the bearings don't seem to flow as fluidly. Looking at the schematics, he was quite impressed at how thorough she was. This is all from that game? How did you get them? These looked almost too professional, and even he would be hard-pressed to imagine a fantasy piece of tech being so grounded in design. I tore my character apart and made a body replica and then used it to study. Is this a game about robotics? Shook her head. No, you play as an immortal soldier fighting against alien threats to protect Earth and the universe. My character even had my mutation so I could use my binocular eyes. Though that might be because I was an exo. As she began to trail off, Majima thought about the fact this must be some in-depth game if you can break down characters for schematics. With a grin, he checked his phone and saw that weekend he was free. Assuming no major incident reports were needed to be made from the rat. Mei, this weekend how about we both go to this place where you played the game? I want to see if I can get a couple ideas for myself. Mei's eyes lit up. Her uncle was her best friend and an even more brilliant inventor. She knew that because he used to make explosions 4 times bigger than the ones she made while inventing. Apparently the current principal of the school he works for was his old teacher, and considering how much her uncle has to do, it seems the rat, as he called him, held a grudge. Having him also spending time dissecting the characters would be fun, but then it also struck her as she recalled another important thing. Could you help me in the game? There's a few quests before I get to the main city, and well, I asked the owner and he said there was meant to be way more technology to see and get my hands on. Apparently there's a lot of alien races and technology one want to see even if they are just in the game. Higuri smiled. At least his niece had a new hobby that he could distract her with to avoid having her detonate his workshop. You got it, half pint. I'm excited to see what's in store for me. The next few days for Izuku had been quite a slow ordeal, with a couple newcomers often coming in only to steer away or complain about the price. Thankfully he had seen Melissa, Mei, and a couple of his newer regulars to at least keep him entertained. But he did have to admit it had been pretty quiet recently, considering the fact his parents took Eri back to their home apartment to get her settled in. Starting up the new school year, they had been debating between either trying out public school or getting a tutor, considering, as his father put it, a DM F King Crow kept her isolated and uneducated. So as they handle that and slowly get her used to being around people after some time. Regardless, this has left him a lot of time and quite the amount of leveling in both Destiny and Resident Evil. So while he was killing time, as he and his father still have not gotten around to actually figuring out what allowed his mother's quirk to randomly develop, he pulled up his current status screen. Name: Midoriya Izuku, user 0002. Current privilege rank, Tier 1. Privileges noted. Can view stat page. Renovation access, T1. Access to Resident Evil. Can add stat points to stat sheet. Current accessible game library. Resident Evil 1. Destiny 2. Sits, 0 points to add. Strength, 20, can break bones with a punch. Dexterity, 19, can thread a needle all of the time. Intelligence, 23, smarter than nearly anyone without an intelligence quirks. Constitution, 20, can run several miles without effort. Realm, early body forging, beginning of this sprout. Realm progression, 20.5, still needing to grow up a lot. Skills, high-speed speech, rapid analysis, mid-tier parallel processing, mid-level CQC, upper mid-level knife combat, mid-level firearm usage, arc intuition, dynamic vision. Inventory items. With that he then pulled up his current mission questline. Time remaining for completion, 20 days. Description: how can you have a MMO if there's no players? Criteria: 7 out of 10 get 10 new players to play Destiny 2 of 5 sell 5-month-long memberships to Destiny 2. Rewards: unlock food, Shin Ramen, 350 yen/300 yen. Game Sync Chamber. Unlock Destiny 2, raids and large-scale missions. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission: demotion of free game usage for host to discounted game usage. The disappointment of the system. Currently active. At his pace right now, he should hopefully reach his goal. However, at the same time, a certain part of him could not help but be pessimistic. Due to some luck, he managed to convince Melissa to also try out the game, and it seemed she was just as unhinged as Mei when it came to picking apart her own body, as she ignored the recommendations of playing a human. To say it was jarring was to be polite, and well, it did seem due to her preparations for the UA exam she was going to spend a decent bit less time in the cafe and focusing on training with her grandpa, as she calls him. Apparently he is really good at quirk training and was the one who helped her uncle train. Realistically, the only person who he could think of was Gran Torino, considering it's pretty well known her uncle is the #1 hero after all. Izuku really had to curb the urge to ask for autograph was immense solely because he could not actually gather the courage to ask her about it. Anyways, he decided to push those thoughts aside as he heard the doors open. Turning, he saw a new customer walk in. She was roughly his height and was constantly glancing around the cafe as she walked in, wearing a pleated purple skirt and red sweater. Yet what made him do a double check was the fact she had long bushy hair that ran down to her shoulders in a lime green with a mix of dark green in her hair. For a moment he almost thought she could be his sister, considering his own darker shades of green in his curly hair. They made eye contact for a brief moment before she walked to the reception desk. Her biggest feature had been the mask with a ventilator attached, which seemed to be the type you would wear as a graffiti artist. His eyes glanced a little more and he chose to ignore the darker patches on her sweater. How much for internet use? Her voice was a little scratchier than he would expect as she glanced at him with sunken eyes and blank pupils. Izuku felt a little bad for staring and chuckled. Our systems aren't exactly enabled to be accessed via the internet and solely for the games we have. With a click of her tongue she sighed and glanced towards the sign he gestured to. Fine, I need something to do anyways. What do you recommend between Resident Evil and Destiny 2? He thought about it, and the silver glint from under the sweater clued him in that she might not exactly be the most legal of people and clearly fond of sharp objects. Both games are fundamentally first-person shooters. But Resident Evil is more of a quirkless survival horror, while if you prefer games more realistic with quirk-like abilities, Destiny 2 is probably the better game. Also, both have enjoyable stories, but Destiny 2 does allow for a co-op feature. As he was about to ramble on, he heard a tap on the desk. I'll try out Resident Evil then. She seemed a little annoyed, but it was more that she seemed tired than anything else. Okay, would you like to sign up for a membership? Is there any benefit? You get a certain amount of hours a month, and they come at a cheaper rate than normal hours. You also gain discounts on drinks and activation costs. I'll get the bronze membership, and can you activate Resident Evil up? Sure, that'll be 8,750 yen total. Sure. Taking out her card, she paid for the membership. What's the name for the account? Shinobu Duken. She replied curtly, taking the membership card from him. That was when Izuku had to stifle his surprise, considering her hands had felt ice cold. Nice to meet you, Shinobu. I am Izuku Midoriya, the owner here. It's nice to meet you, Midoriya. He could almost tell she was smiling behind the mask as she went to sit in a booth. With that, he quietly went back to watching over the cafe. That made her 4 in the cafe at the moment. He had built up a few students that became avid regulars, yet judging by the fact it was still only just past 12 p.m. on a Tuesday, but Izuku was not exactly going to judge them for it. But then he directed his thoughts to his current status. It took him a while, but it seems for whatever reason he had begun stagnating at around 20 points. In his mind, he decided to start talking to the system again. Hey system, why have I not been going up in stat points recently? With a short chime she replied. You are reaching what is normally considered the base human limit. Normally in cultivation you would already be training to establish a core and gaining chi. However, within this world what would originally have been chi is now known as QFR. However, exactly because of that I cannot naturally process it into an energy source for your body as it does not naturally fit with you. Is that why a lot of people with quirks seem to be somewhat stronger even without a physical quirk? Essentially yes, as quirks are essentially a rigid chi core that expresses their abilities in a singular method, which helps add to enhancing their bodies overall to properly cope with the stress a quirk affects on them. Yet, as a quirkless individual, you do have the benefit you are able to adjust what is your chi core usually. What do you usually mean? Well, considering you don't exactly have an affinity for a quirk, you technically cannot really create a proper chi core as you are, solely because your body needs to be capable of handling foreign energy types. The best way to do this is to gain access to an outer realm source. Like what? Like Void, Arc and Solar. Aren't those from Destiny 2? Precisely. That's the reason why you need the game's sync chamber. Essentially what it does for you is basically fully integrate you into your character. Still without the risk of permanent death. It however will cause you a lot more harm if you do. At the same time can get you to HRNSS and absorb the energy you control until your actual body accumulates enough. That's pretty cool and all, but wouldn't I need access to the Traveler to have that power? Normally yes, but in a way it builds your core and can store QFR for you in a container within your body, without actually directly affecting you or harming you. With slow accumulation of power you will eventually be able to adjust till the foreign energy helps raise your physique up. So just finish my quest and I will be able to finally get past the bottleneck? Pretty much. Izuku groaned and rested his head on the reception desk. Getting people to play or even buy the game at least once is fine. Yet to have people willing to commit to a month-long membership is nearly impossible. After all, it's both a lot of money and you also have to pay for membership to consistently gain use out of it. And with that he decided to finally catch up on his lack of sleep for the last couple weeks and dozed off at the desk. A sudden tap to his head woke him up as he hastily wiped the drool off his face and tiredly blinked into focus. In front of him was Mei in her pink dreadlocks and blatant hyperactive energy, but beside her was a man about just less than even his height. What made Izuku curious was the way he scratched his chin with fingers that looked like metal scoops. Huh, that kind of looks like. His eyes practically bulged in recognition. Excuse me, but are you Power Loader? The man seemed almost pleased to be recognized with the grin that peered through his overgrown ginger hair. That's me, kid. Here to check out what this gaming cafe is all about, considering my little niece here kept raving about it. Izuku was practically overjoyed that an actual hero was right here and clearly wanting to try out his store. He nearly choked on his own panic as he stammered out his next lines. Well, we do have a couple games to offer. Currently in the VR systems we offer Resident Evil and Destiny. You need to pay the activation fee, game fee and hourly rates. But purchasing a membership will save you significant money in the long run. Well, I guess I'll just be trying it out today, and for the game I might as well play Destiny 2 since Mei would not shut up about it. Glancing his way to the pink dreadlocks and hyperactivity itself, he saw she already herself down and opened up the payment function on the machine itself. A feature made for just the members of the service like Mei who had purchased the game and hourly rates membership together. How many hours are you looking to play? We do have a limit of 6 hours maximum per customer. A time limit? That doesn't really seem efficient if you have paying customers willing for more. Higuri mused as he had some insight into the drawbacks of virtual technology, having done a couple studies on it back in his university years. It's to limit mental fatigue, and considering how immersive it can be, a longer duration may even cause some severe drawbacks in the long run. That's a fair point. Well, Mei is going to be playing her money's worth, so I'll pay for 6 hours and Destiny 2 in full. Izuku nodded as he worked out the cost. That'll be 5750 yen for the full day. A curt nod as he pulled his card out and paid for it. To be honest, that isn't exactly the worst cost if this is really what Mei was talking about. The company behind the technology does pride itself on its innovations. But is it possible if I get your autograph? Of course, Fair warning, can you lend me a pencil or a sturdy pen with these fingers? With that he clicked the metal ends of his fingers with a dry chuckle. Aren't exactly made to hold things properly. Izuku grabbed a metal pen he had in the drawer and passed it to him along with his notebook. As Higuri took his time writing out his signature, he glanced at all the information, questions and analysis the kid in front of him had written about him in this notebook. Better yet, it was labeled Hero Notebook 15. Are you looking into entering the heroics or support industry? This time Izuku returned a dry chuckle. It's just a hobby, I'm not exactly built for heroics. Support should still be an option, it's not like it needs some special quirk to be good at it. That's true, but after some personal stuff I decided to cut off from the entire aspiration. Guess I won't be able to convince you, kid, but this is some seriously good stuff here. Like this is some quality analysis work. It isn't on par with the best of the best, but it's career level already, and at your age that's impressive. He settled a business card on the desk. If you ever want to look up internships later on, or the sort, you can just give me a call. Working for UA lets me get into contact with some high-level analysts. Nothing on par with Hisashi Midoriya, but they are still some of the best. A small smile was all he could offer at the sheer praise of his father he heard from one of his favorite heroes. That's honestly an amazing offer. If I ever want to try and get into the industry, I'll give you a call. Now I do hope you enjoy your experience in the game. Higuri gave him a nod, not bothering to push the boy any further in the moment as he sat down and began to play. Izuku settled back in his seat and decided to let the rest of the day go by as he did some studying behind the desk, thinking back to the whole discussion about the system and how it wanted him to unlock the game's sync chamber. While doing that and looking for new heroes, seeing a couple newly mentioned heroes, including one from the UDAS called Kerbin, a close copy to that old character from the game, Kirby, considering his wraith round shape, pink aesthetic, and the ability to eat through anything including rubble and debris as a rescue hero, it's fitting. Though it was equally amusing that despite the quirk wars and everything else that happened a couple hundred years ago, Nintendo somehow pulled through and retained all their copyrights. He really needed to actually figure out just the raw amount of strength he had. A big issue for Izuku and his growing stats was lacking the opportunity to actually go to a gym or the sort to figure out. But he guessed that would be a discussion for later as he saw a familiar blonde figure walk in. Clearly she had been putting on muscle in recent days as he waved to her. "Hey Melissa, are you up for some more games today?" With a grin she nodded her head. "Yeah, I've been busy training for the recommendation exam at UA in a month or so." "Isn't that still nearly 6 months ahead of the actual exam?" "It is, so if you don't get in during the recommendation you can always recover and try to get into the academy via the standard exam. It's also for students of other courses who apply for the academic scholarships." Izuku nodded along and began to ring up her selection for the day before he realized she was still there. "Oh, did you plan on playing something different today?" She nodded with a smile. "I was thinking of trying out Destiny 2. That's a good choice because of the amount of technology in it, and the entire world is a lot bigger than Resident Evil. Though it centers around usage of abilities and powers. That actually sounds really cool to try out. How much is it to run the game?" 750 yen for a day or 15,000 yen for a month. If you play at least 20 days or more you pay it off. "That's true. I'll get the monthly membership considering I do play often enough to make it back, and it really doesn't cost much to me. Anyways, Izuku, do you do anything outside of working at the cafe?" "Not really, I have to work every day considering I am obligated by the franchise. And at the moment I have to manage it without another employee considering they want me to at least run it for a PRD of TI-." As Izuku was about to finish the statement he heard the system chime. "Users are permitted to take days off and you can have them incorporated. Considering overlooking the work schedule, I recommend setting Wednesday as the day off due to it being the quietest day of the week for work." "Are you sure?" "Certainly." With that, Izuku regained his focus with a chuckle. "I can probably take next Wednesday off. It's usually quiet, and after this week I am overdue on a break." Melissa's eyes lit up as she smiled. "Well, you already have my number on record. How about you send me a message so I can save your number? If you like, I'd love to hang out next week." Izuku, in his pure bliss of ignorance, nodded. I'll send you a message later if you'd like and we can decide what you want to do on Wednesday. She gave a softer smile. That's really sweet. It'll be nice to hang out with a friend. His reply almost made her feel startled as Melissa just realized she was friend-zoned. Ow? Is he really not picking up my signals? No, that's not it. He probably wants to take things slow. That makes more sense. As she rationalized being friend-zoned, she walked off to one of the booths and signed in as she began to play. As she went off, Izuku smiled at the idea of making another friend and one he could even hang out with regularly as he saved Melissa's number to his phone. And thus he went quietly back to musing to himself, now a step closer to finishing his mission. The day slowly came to an end and Izuku was about to get ready to clean. Mei and her uncle had already headed off for the evening a little earlier, one talking about her babies and the other describing length funding applications. As he went to get some cleaning supplies, he realized one booth was still full and looking over he chuckled at the fact Melissa was still around. Going up to her, he tapped her on the shoulder. Melissa, it's nearly closing time. It is. Her voice was clear in her surprise as she hastily took off the headset, not realizing how close Izuku was. She turned to face his voice. Startled, he backed away, turning a little red as it dawned on him that their faces nearly touched. Looking embarrassed, he rubbed the back of his head. Sorry, I didn't realize I got so close. Melissa, who had been an equally bright shade of red, shook her head. No, it's completely fine. You were just trying to remind me it was nearly closing time. Accidents happen all the time. Her voice almost broke into a squeak as her heart was racing much faster than even Midoriya's. Growing up, although her dad was supportive of her endeavors in support technology and eventually heroism, he had been overly protective, especially regarding boys and the sort, so she had even less contact with them than Midoriya. Frankly, other than family members, Midoriya was the only male friend she even had. Getting up, she set the headset down and grabbed her coat. I'll head out. Midoriya wouldn't want to keep you from closing the store. She waved as she glanced to him before walking to the exit. See you soon, Melissa. Izuku was a little panicked as he called out to Melissa, who turned to face him suddenly as she kept walking, only to collide with what felt like a brick wall. Following the brick wall was a sudden squeak. Confused, she looked up and saw a man that she had met before. Hisashi Midoriya carried a little girl in his arms with the same stark white hair, but she had a horn on her forehead. His face simply had an amused smile to it. I'm so sorry for bumping into the both of you. She bowed, trying to genuinely express how bad she felt, especially since she clearly surprised Eri. It's all right. That's a mistake anyone could make. It's nice to meet you again. He put his hand out to shake hers. Easing up, she smiled, grateful he did not seem upset about the situation. That's great. I'm so sorry once again, and it's nice to meet you. But as she shook his hand, that faint glow sparked up as she gripped his hand. Almost as if her quirk was reacting to him. Quirk troubles again? He remarked, seeming amused, while Eri seemed a little mesmerized by the sparks. Hastily pulling away, she nodded. Yeah. I'm still not perfect with my quirk. Being a strength stockpiler, it's been difficult to manage it as a late bloomer. A late bloomer always has struggles with their quirks. My little brother was relatively late in manifesting his quirk. I had helped him manage his, as it was a strength stockpiler of sorts as well. If you like, I can offer my consulting services. With that, he pulled out a sleek black card with the top being the title, Oracle Foundation of America for Counseling. Wait, you're the Hisashi Midoriya of the OFAC? As Izuku came to pick up Eri out of Hisashi's arms, he put on his smuggest smile. Well, of course I am. I can assure you my consulting services are the best in the business. That's actually amazing. I heard it's nearly impossible to get an appointment with you. That's normally true, but I suppose I could do a favor for a loyal customer and friend of my son. But aren't you also meant to be situated in America? Of course I am, otherwise the title of the group would not make sense. But recently I am taking a hiatus from work to be with my family. Then doesn't that mean I'd be taking up time you could spend with your family? Of course not. I do have some idle time between my son working and my wife as well. So normally I'm just spending time with Eri. She's handling her own stockpiler, isn't that right, little one? He then booped Eri's nose as Izuku held her and she let out a giggle. Well, if that's the case, I'll talk with my uncle and my mentor about it. They are currently giving me advice since they've had experience handling a quirk similar to mine. His face seemed to almost turn into a mask as he let out a amused hum. Is that so? Yeah. Her phone suddenly rang and she quickly took the card. That's my uncle, he must be outside. Ah, then you best be off. He stepped to the side to let her pass him. As she got to the door, she looked to Izuku. By the way, Izuku, remember you promised to message me to confirm your number and what we agreed to on Wednesday. And once she had left, Izuku flustered. She hurried out to meet her uncle who was waiting to pick her up. Once the car she got into had long since passed, Hisashi stood there with the biggest grin as he looked towards his son. My dear boy, what could be happening this Wednesday? A lass like her had to remind you? Izuku looked a little sheepish as he held an equally curious Eri. Due to their immense amount of free time, Eri and Hisashi had been watching a rather large amount of rom-coms and sitcoms to amuse the small child. So even she could imagine what was happening when a boy was making promises with a girl. Dad, it isn't like that. She just wants to hang out as friends, that's all. At this point, Hisashi recalled how much Melissa blushed in front of Izuku and how they seemed to be glancing back and forth even as he was talking to her. With the pain of realizing his son inherited his least desirable trait besides a mild case of megalomania, he put his hands on his son's shoulders. Internally cursing the fact he knew well enough, he could not insist anything to this dense brick, otherwise he would shelve it as denial. Izuku, I'm sorry for the hardships that being my son will bring. Even Eri sighed and looked to her father and back to her brother. Bushney is dumb. Izuku looked shocked to be insulted by his little sister. Eri, what are you talking about? It's true. She had this silly little pout that helped him get over his shock, even if it was just because he could not stop himself laughing. Son, why don't you close the shop and I'll order some takeout? Your mother is having a girls' night with your Aunt Mitsuki and some work friends. I think she mentioned someone called Ashido and Ojiro. So I decided to bring Eri to visit you and we could enjoy a movie night. Izuku nodded as he cleaned up the store and locked the door. What film are we watching? Eri giggled in Hisashi's arms now and squeaked out, 5 Nights at Freddy's. That threw Izuku through a loop as he froze and turned to Eri. Wait, I don't think a kid should be watching that. It's fine, Izuku. Besides, I managed to access those old internet servers I stole from YouTube before the Quirk Wars really kicked off. Had plenty of video game footage to show her, and also turns out I had it on Blu-ray. I forgot they even bothered to release it. That's besides the point. All 6 of them actually. Thankfully consoles haven't made any major advancements in Blu-ray, so I'll set up my old PS5 and we can use that. Dad, where are you getting these things? The vault. He said it so calmly that Izuku wasn't sure if he was being funny or not. I'm going to just finish sweeping. I'll be okay with whatever you order for takeout. With the good to go, Hisashi took Eri upstairs to set up the PS5 while Izuku made sure his store was clean. After taking some time to clean up, Izuku started to wonder just what exactly was the goal of the system. If he solely relied on its name, it would be to establish an internet cafe, but even that seemed illogical. After all, why else would it provide so many benefits? And even when he questioned his father on the idea of realms, even he was a little lost. The best he had was old cultivation novels and manhwa his father collected over the decades. But even then they seemed borderline absurd in just the sheer amount of abilities they could achieve. It made someone like Stars and Stripes seem nearly insignificant in the face of it. Yet he decided to push those questions to the back of his head as he headed upstairs. Sitting under a bundle of fluffy blankets was Eri, who seemed quite comfortable as she was clearly bouncing in excitement. While Hisashi had been busying himself in the kitchen making nachos with melted cheese and fresh salsa as well as popcorn. Seeing his son come upstairs, he smiled. Izuku, the food will be here in about 15 minutes. I decided to order pizza. It might be a good way to get Eri to try different foods. Hisashi was just tidying the kitchen and seemed to cover the food in what looked to be a red bubble. Dad, what's the bubble for? Izuku looked at and even touched it, but it let him pass through like air. It's a thermal retention quirk. Originally I used it while exploring the Arctic and got really annoyed at wearing so many layers. Now I just use it to stop food from cooling down. He replied nonchalant as he went and pulled out a small wad of bills, taking out exactly the amount for the takeaway. That's amazing, albeit a really boring way to use such a quirk. But why were you in the Arctic to begin with? Hisashi literally froze as he turned away with an awkward cough. A man can have dreams, Izuku. What dreams do you have in a frozen wasteland? You'll understand when you get older. With it he ruffled his boy's tuft of green hair and sat beside the bundle of blankets that was airy. Inwardly he would pray his son never found out he had built a fortress of solitude in the depths of the Arctic. Also it was where he kept his biggest vault of trinkets and possessions. Pushing aside the blatant dodge of a question, he sat beside the two of them as they settled in waiting for the takeout so they could start their movie. Elsewhere in a bar sat Tamura Shigaraki sipping a glass of something. He was not actually sure it was sweet and at the very least somewhat alcoholic. As of this moment he was facing, in his opinion, his greatest crisis. Why do I want to destroy everything? He scratched at his neck as he sipped. Kurogiri gave him a musing glance, debating whether to push the boy into his own revelations or let them come to him alone. Muttering to himself, he thought back to the root of it all. His hatred, the incessant need to decay, and a feeling of destroying the world itself. Originally his father and sensei, as he had come to address him originally, never really bothered to advise him, simply giving him outlets for these urges to kill. Not because he was neglectful, but his sensei knew he was far from the right person to ever deliver advice on how to cope with violent thoughts. But unlike Tamura, his sensei preferred to express his malice in subtle ways, which arguably by how far that malice could reach made it so much worse. If someone insulted or tried to fight Tamura, he simply would kill them. His sensei, however, preferred to find every ounce of information about the person who wronged him and slowly treat his life like a game of chess heading to a downward spiral till the man eventually killed himself. Yet he knew he lacked the patience for that level of malice filled with pride. The source of his anguish came from three sources: his home, the inaction of society, and finally the worship of heroes. His home was filled with people who simply overlooked his suffering at the hands of his father simply because he was the man of the house. The inaction of society left a bloody and traumatized child to be left wandering the streets in need of help, only to be turned away by the assurance, a hero will come. Finally, those very heroes slowly began to rot from the inside, moving towards higher income parts of cities and neglecting areas rife in crime simply to earn sponsors. Heroes who failed to be heroes for the simple fact to them it was a quick rich scheme to promote the idea of powerful quirks. He finally figured out what he hated so much: the helplessness of being weak. His need for destruction was to simply watch the ivory tower come falling down. Even in truth, however, came his doubts as he had to face them. He met those he would happily call friends, those who encountered their own hardships and stood strong. Even then, in those cruel realities, regardless of privilege or biardage, they still wanted to help others and be heroes. Maybe what he needed was not to purge the world entirely, but simply where the rot festered. Kurogiri looked at the boy who he was tasked with caring for since he was just a child, but calling him a boy would no longer be appropriate. After all this time, it seems with a resolve in his heart, he finally became a man. So he decided he would serve his young Estar a celebratory drink. Tamura drank the sweet drink once more, but the flavors no longer felt as dull as before. It was almost like a nectar to his tongue that felt so refreshing as he opened his eyes. He would simply be the destruction that leads the world to rebuild itself anew. As a phoenix can only be reborn from within its own ashes, so must the world. Once the rot that persists was gone, his itch would finally leave him. But even he was aware enough to know that he could not do this alone. Getting up, he put on the jacket Kurogiri had so tastefully picked out for him, and he smiled, finally seeing just how much this person he once saw as a tool mattered to him. Kurogiri, tell Jiren to put out a notice. The League of Villains is recruiting. With a curt bow, Kurogiri felt a dull sense of joy in this moment as he knew his MSTR's goals would be reached, and now the young MSTR had his own. As you wish, it will be done. In the shadows of this broken society, a new order would come. Izuku let out a yawn as he tried to stretch and sit up, only to find some weight on his chest. Rubbing his eyes, he looked to his chest to find a sleeping and drooling Aries snuggled atop of him. To be honest, he did not expect to enjoy the films, but they really did pick up in scares after the first one. He recalled his dad chuckling about the fact the scariest character in the entire film was the one character who was not even in the first game it was based on. Doing his best, he sat himself up and kept Eri in his arms as he sighed, recalling the fact the three of them had ended up sleeping on the sofa because after the fourth film it made it a little uncomfortable to sleep on a bed for some time. Hearing a chuckle from the kitchen, he glanced over and saw his dad making what seemed to be pancakes. "Good to see you finally woke up," he said with a grin. "Looks like the little unicorn found herself a comfortable pillow. Aren't you funny? How many photos did you end up taking?" Izuku chuckled back, knowing his dad's love of taking photos of nearly anything. 42. The storage on modern phones really is something else. I guess it's no surprise storage technology and the sorts had improved even if everything else did not. Then again, people were too busy having to handle the fact so much technology and medicine had to be readjusted and reinvented for quirked people. Anyways, what do you want on your pancakes? Chocolate spread and chocolate chips. As basic as always. I'll add some strawberries. You need a healthier diet and then you can get the store open. Luckily it's only about 7 and who said using a time bubble to cram multiple films into one day was a waste of power. That still confuses me. How did an ability like that even come into CNCPTN? Most abilities are hereditary or a random factor for anyone that was a first-generation quirk user. Surprisingly enough, it was a third-generation quirkless that ended up developing a quirked gene. Unlikely as it is, the quirk gene is a weird one that will sometimes mutate a quirkless gene set. And the more generations of modern quirkless it goes through, the more potent the power that eventually manifests. How else do you think Stars and Stripes got the ability to practically manipulate laws of reality? If you could get that through selective quirk breeding, most governments would not have criminalized quirk eugenics. Izuku went quiet as he thought about it for a second. It seemed contradictory, but his dad really knew better quirks than him, and so he decided to just double-check his current quest log while Eri kept sleeping. Time remaining for completion, 15 days. Description: how can you have a MMO if there's no players? Criteria: 9 out of 10 get 10 new players to play Destiny. 4 of 5 sell 5-month-long memberships to Destiny 2. Rewards: unlock food, Shin Ramen, 350 yen/300 yen. Game Sync Chamber. Unlock Destiny 2, raids and large-scale missions. Penalty for the denial or failure of the mission. Demotion of free game usage for host to discounted game usage. The disappointment of the system. Currently active. If he could sell just one more, then he would be moving on to the next part of what the system had planned for him. As tempting as it was to just ask his dad to buy it, in a way it felt like cheating. That is the correct host. Requesting someone outside of business hours directly to purchase services is against recommended practices and lowers the host's and my dignity. The familiar chime and line rang out, leading him to sigh as he did his best to move Eri onto the sofa and tuck her in with a blanket. Getting to the kitchen table, he enjoyed his pancakes as his dad was reading a newspaper, but what threw him off was the date, December 31st, 2019, and the following title, Mass Pneumonia Outbreak. "Dad, I think that newspaper is a little outdated." He gestured to the date. His father gave a soft smile as he adjusted the paper in his hands. "Just enjoying the nostalgia. You wouldn't think from this paper, but the virus in this paper proceeded to practically bring the world to a halt for 2 years. Shutting down public transport, public facilities like schools, and all sorts. It's an interesting tale of how quickly something you could pass off as peculiar or an isolated case could easily catch up to your own life." Getting up, he leaned over and wiped the chocolate off Izuku's face and ruffled his hair. "Anyways, enough of me enjoying the past and the longest holiday I've ever had from school. You should get ready for work." Izuku nodded, washing his dishes and heading downstairs to open the cafe at 7:59 a.m. In front of the door, already waiting, he could see an eager Mei practically bouncing off the walls, and what he could hardly tell was either hiding his excitement or just here to babysitting Mei was Power Loader. "You two are quite early today?" he said in a little surprise as he let them in. "Well, Mei doesn't have school and I managed to convince Nizu I was doing a research project, so I left." him to handle the preparations for the upcoming exams. So this is a much-needed break, kid. Walking in, he sighed as he watched Mei bolt to a booth and get herself settled in. You know, this is like the only time she ever takes off her goggles. Otherwise she'll even sleep with them on, assuming she actually goes to sleep. But whatever you're doing with this tech is working wonders in convincing her to go to bed on time, mostly because she rationalized it as the sooner she sleeps the sooner the next day comes. Anyways, I'll move out the door frame. He followed in with a grin across his face as he headed to his own booth. Another familiar face walked in as well. Shinobu gave him what he could only assume might be a smile behind her familiar mask. Hey there, Green. Green. He replied, a little surprised she would give him a nickname. Yep, based on the fact you are quite literally called Midori. He sighed and nodded. That's fair. Anyways, you seem a lot happier today. Well, yesterday trying out that game, it felt nice having a jaw. Having a jaw? She nodded as she looked a little sullen. My quirk leaves me in some ways both a vampire and a zombie. Cold body temperature, a BPM with an average of 5 and enhanced strength based on blood consumption. Yet it comes with a cost. I have a skeletal jaw, which was a shocker because if I do not drink enough blood my jaw will fall off. I can put it back on, but it always feels clunky and detached, so I wear a mask to stop it falling. Got the name from a Chinese doctor when my family and I were on holiday in China, and he decided to name it Jiangshi Jaw. Turns out the blood-needing requirement came from my mother's side. But she can use blood to manipulate her appearance somewhat to match the person she drank. Small things like matching eye colors, hair, and if they are a woman she can take on their full appearance with enough. The zombie part came from my dad and his enhanced strength in exchange for basically being a living dead, but arguably the only thing dead is his gray skin tone and receding hairline. She let out a slight chuckle, lamenting at her own troubles as she sat at a booth and began playing some Resident Evil. Izuku wondered if it was going to be a quiet day and what might his friends be up to. Tamura did say he would visit often, but he still had not even visited once. But he might just be busy. Tamura sighed as he looked and filtered through the stack of files in his hands. As tempting as it was to practically dust it all, he would rather not trouble Kurogyari with getting a new set from Jiren. Despite him insisting these are his only copies, Tamura had no doubts that the old dealer kept countless more. Dabi, Mustard, Twice, Toga. He groaned reading through just the first 4 files. The problems were so prevalent he wanted to hit his head against a wall. 2 of them were children, one was a mentally unstable individual who needed therapy and not villainy, while the last one seemed to have this ideal of fighting endeavor. For the love of God, he had a fire quirk. Did he expect to beat the man dubbed the Pyro Paragon with fire? At the very least, he must be confident his flames burn hotter, and judging by the stapled purple skin, at the very least they were hotter than he could handle. Seriously, what was Jiren thinking? Apparently he armed one of those children with a gun. Tamura knew calling anyone insane or deranged was a pot-calling kettle black moment, yet in his recent clarity of thought his introspections made a lot more sense. Pushing those 4 files to the side, he glanced at a few other files. Stain the Hero Killer, Magna, Dusty Ash, and someone called Dead Jaw. These 4 all seemed to have matching ideologies about fighting against societal structures and corruption. Stain was already building up a kill count and preached a belief that made him practically his own religion. Magna and Dead Jaw seemed to despise the ideas of tying people's identities to quirks and other factors. While Dusty Ash seemed to simply be sick of how flashy quirks seemed to be worshipped and anything else was seen as lesser. Sitting there, he watched Kurogyari pick up a couple of the files and read them himself. These all seemed to be decent enough selections, well besides the young boy Mustard. He might need intervention, and so does that man Twice. Yet his ability to create copies very much makes him a welcomed member. While Miss Toga does seem to be an unfortunate victim of poor treatment from her parents because of her quirk. That made Tamura freeze. One thing that dug deep and always made that itch in his mind worsen was people that reminded him of his father. Abusive parents were the worst of them all. Demenit, the latter 4 we can send invitations to immediately. But the prior 4 are still iffy. We can take in Dabi, Twice, and maybe Toga. But keep Mustard from this and pay Jiren whatever it takes to get that gun off him. Anyways, Tell him we'll pay him for each one that joins. He took a sip of his drink as he thought about Toga. Being hated just for who you are or something you could not control nor understand reminded him of his father's abuse and hatred for heroes that bled into his excuses to beat him. It made him shake as he felt grateful for the gloves he wore. Getting up, he needed a break. I'm going to my room. Understood, young MSTR. But if you are looking to calm down, how about you pay your friend a visit? Tamura had a smile on his face as he recalled he had promised Izuku a visit. Fine, send me through a portal. I'll call you when I need a return portal. As you wish. With that, the dark swirling depths of purple formed a portal in front of Tamura, stretching out of the cloud that was Kurogiri. Stepping through the sun stung his eyes as he saw from where he stood in the alley across. Origin Gaming Cafe. Izuku stood in front of the mirror feeling a little antsy as he kept cycling through t-shirts. Looking at his clock in his room, it was 11:30 p.m. and the night before he planned on hanging out with Melissa. She was his first friend after all, and he would prefer to try and not scare her off. The current one he had was a neon green with the phrase, "Gym Top," stricken across it. Yet as he was about to put it on, he was left flinching as a blast of sound rang his eardrums. Ow, what was that for? Izuku rubbed his sore ears, talking to no one else in the room. In her familiar haughty tone, the system huffed, I am not having my host be a bumbling idiot whose fashion sense would be a legal crime. Neon green with the shade of red you have for shoes, you might as well brown breathes to look like a Christmas tree. Recently Izuku had been finding the system was taking the initiative in speaking and being rather upfront. Host, I'm not saying you have to be like your predecessor, but some sense of style, especially around women, would be good. You say that like my predecessor had some kind of HRM of women throwing themselves at him. Izuku mused as he started looking through the clothing till he found a maroon top. There was a small bout of silence before the system spoke again. You are not exactly wrong in that regard. Not that he really made a move on them, but that came from his personal disconnect with the world around him, I suppose. Anyways, if you are going for the maroon top, the black jeans might be nice with it, and the black jacket. Red and green do complement, but too much and people will think winter came early. Rolling his eyes, he followed the system's advice and put them on. Oddly enough, with his darker green hair, it surprisingly worked well. You're right, this actually looks really nice on me. Feeling satisfied, he left the outfit onto his bed and decided to get some sleep. But as he shut the lights off and got into bed, he heard a final beep. Enjoy your date tomorrow, host. It's not a date. He protested as he tried to push the intrusive thoughts down, his mind excited to see Melissa tomorrow. The blaring of his alarm dragged him out of bed as he sleepily sat up and hit the button. It was 5 o'clock, but he was too nervous to sleep much longer. So he got out of bed and cleaned before having some breakfast. Just a fried egg on top of some rice and soy sauce. When he was done, he glanced at the time and sighed. It was only 5:45 when he finished everything. I think I woke up a little too early. Izuku sighed, slumping onto the sofa. It was just a hangout, but at the same time it was just him and Melissa. His first friend outside of his online group and the first friend he made in person. I mean, it was also technically the first girl he's really met. Setsuna didn't really count since she was so tomboyish it was kind of hard to even bother with that. But to him, Melissa was basically a girl. I mean, she probably does not see it as a date, so why should he? He will just head down to the cafe and play some games. On the other side of Mustafu, Melissa was currently awake at the same time, but unfortunately she was still trying to figure out what outfit she wanted to wear. Currently prancing around, she glanced at the weather and it was supposed to be sunny. What if it began raining? Did she need to carry an umbrella? Wait, would she get to have that scene of sharing an umbrella with Izuku like every shoujo manga she read? As she was blitzing around her room panicking, Tashinori leant against the door frame with his creaking bones and chuckled. Mel, you're overthinking this. Besides, you're just meeting with this friend of yours, the one who runs the cafe. Melissa nodded as she began rifling through her wardrobe. Yeah, he's funny, sweet, really intelligent and absolutely adorable being so small. She did not even realize she was raving about the boy. Sounds like a real catch. Kid reminds me of someone, but I can't really remember who. But Mel just picked an outfit that is comfortable since you two didn't plan on going around Mustafu since you had been too busy training for that. Yeah, I was going to see if he wanted to go and look around the hero district. You know, with all the agencies and the museum? She grabbed a red plaid shirt and beige jeans to go with a pair of brown boots. That sounds like a solid choice. Is he a hero nut like you? Yeah, I saw his journals before when he was talking to Mei. He had all sorts of hero analysis. Tashinori choked on the air with a sudden cough. Hero analysis? Yeah, are you okay, Uncle Toshi? I'm fine, Mel. Just get ready for your date and I'll make sure to send you a few thousand yen for the day. Does 30,000 sound okay? It was Melissa's time to let out a startled splutter. Uncle Toshi, that's way too much. We are just going to check out a museum and maybe get some food. Not a 5-star dinner. Well, I suppose that's fair. But you could buy some hero merchandise with that. I might keep merchandise based on me at a lower price because I'd like anyone that really wants one to get one. After all, I remember when I was a kid, the pain of not being able to get the figure of your favorite hero because it was just too expensive stuck with me. Anyways, I'll send you a little more and maybe you can get some of that hero fangirling out of your system before the entrance exams. Wouldn't want you losing focus over seeing some of Japan's most iconic. He chuckled, shutting the door to let her get changed. Tashinori sat on his bed with a sigh, opening a pack of painkillers, grimacing at the sheer amount he had to swallow to just make the pain manageable as he looked to the ceiling. Thoughts came back to the day he met that boy with green hair, a quirkless boy who aspired to be a hero. It hurt him inside telling that boy to be realistic, but at the end of the day he knew better than everyone what kind of hell it was to try and be a quirkless hero. Hell, he saw the death of quirkless heroes in his youth and how the media would attack their status as an excuse for them failing to survive. Even in situations where no quirk would make a difference, they were always highlighted as being inferior heroes because of having no powers. Even then, in order to be a quirkless hero outside of the underground and C-listers, you would need an insane amount of technology and funding to even go toe-to-toe with the best. Getting up, he picked up the picture frame. It was of him at Takoba Beach with Nana ruffling his hair. He smiled at the picture. He remembered bitterly when she told him the same words he gave the boy. But unlike him, she followed those words with an offering of one for all. That was another thing that ached at him. When he saw the boy run fearlessly at that monster helping to pull away the other boy, he did it without hesitation. He would be a great hero, but that recklessness would be dangerous. Grabbing his wound, it was a bitter reminder that one for all did not make him invincible no matter how much people thought. Giving the boy the quirk may have given him the chance to become a hero, but at the same time, should one for all go to another holder as reckless as him? Melissa showed her potential, a knack of technology, how she managed to save everyone from that fire in the island, and she was such a bright child. Was it fair to make a judgment without knowing the boy fully? Even though he knew it was not, he could just waste time learning to know if someone could be a worthy vessel or if he would make the same mistakes he did. A certain choice was already at hand, so why bother with anything else? But if he had another chance, he would have at least offered to sponsor the boy's education. Hearing a knock on his door, he opened it to see Melissa grinning in her outfit. "How do I look, Uncle Toshi?" Tashinori chuckled. She really looked like Athie, David's wife. "You look wonderful. Now how about we go to that American diner down the road? I'm really craving some pancakes and bacon for breakfast." Melissa nodded. "Sounds good to me, but Recovery Girl did say you had to manage your diet, otherwise you might injure your stomach even more." Tashinori chuckled knowingly. "I'm aware, but one cheat day won't kill me, probably. Wouldn't that be a headline? All Might killed by bacon for breakfast. Hopefully the diner at least uses the tagline 'Their food is to die for after I pass.'" With a grin at his own grim humor, they headed out to get some breakfast before he set his niece off onto her very first date, even if the poor lad she was going with did not know it was meant to be a date. Classic Shield mixed messages. To all my Hypertech fans, I am sorry to say I most likely will not continuing the story due to immense burnout towards the My Hero fandom and universe. As well as not being happy with how I had written so poorly, it was a disrespect to everyone that I genuinely feel bad for. However, I will not be orphaning the work itself currently unless I find someone I can trust to work on it and give you the story you truly deserve. I will be working on other fanfictions and my own original works you can find on Royal Road under the same name I use on AO3. I wish the best to everyone who loved this work and I am sorry for being silent for so many months.